Is it? Let's see if I can. Okay, we're going to get started here. Okay, I want to call to order, please, the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will move on to our roll call.
Councilmember Shuto? Here. Councilmember Knudsen?
Present.
Councilmember Koberstein? Here. Vice Mayor Doring?
Here.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Here. So we'll move on to our public forum. This is where members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public that are not on the agenda. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes, and each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. So if there is public comment, please come to the podium, and I want to sort of remind folks that there's a 4-minute limit, and when you're at 3.5 minutes, the yellow light will come on, and that will tell you to start wrapping up your presentation, because what we want to do is have it so that we don't leave it to me to judge when you need to stop. So we're just trying to make sure that people see the yellow light and they know that you're coming to the point where you need to sort of wind it up. So we appreciate the public comment, though, so thank you for being here.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Yakabachi. I work for the city. I live at 1417 Tainter Street. And Amy and I, for the last about week or so, have just been talking. We've been putting on Jingle All the Way. As you know, it's a partnership, and we just wanted to take a moment to thank City Council for their support. We have relied on your support since January of last year, and I've seen every single one of you guys at the event, if not once, multiple times, which is so great. I know the other day, Paul, he'd not even gone home yet, and he stopped by the rink, and Anna brought like the entire elementary school to the rink on Monday. And the event would not be possible, and it wouldn't be as successful as it is had you guys not entrusted your faith in us to put together these details. And I know, coming from a very small team in the rec department and Amy having a small team, I think that the relationship and partnership with the chamber and the city has been really great, and I think it serves both the community and our visitors the same in a really cohesive environment that doesn't feel local versus tourist. You know, it just feels visitor, guest of the event that we're hosting at the park. And we've had incredible traffic, unbelievable reviews. I have people texting me all the time, like, my kid can't wait to go back to skate, even if they could barely stand. Adult skating. So it's been overall really fun experience. I've learned so much from the chamber. I'm now a celebrity, had you guys not already known that. And, the exposure would not be what it was without Amy. She's got this partnership with this agency. We didn't have a PR agency last year, and it's unbelievable what it's just gotten us in news, publications, on the radio, getting to talk about Santa Elena in Sacramento. It was such a cool experience for me. And we are just so thrilled with the turnout and hoping for sunny days and continuing to try to open when we can and just bring holiday cheer to Santa Elena. And we did have some other announcements quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, thank you on behalf of the chamber, and also just give a little bit of feedback that I've gotten from a lot of local businesses as well as our members, how grateful they are for the city and for the council and what you guys have really done this year for the holidays. The feedback I've gotten with the lights on Main Street has just been, I have not received one negative comment. Everybody is so happy and thrilled. They're thrilled about the event. It's been really busy downtown, and like she said, we've gotten a lot of press. You know, we've really put out a really big outreach. We've had we're going to have a total of 16 influencers that are coming. We've done television appearances, and I know that we've really been working really hard to just make this event a success and to keep it going for years to come. So again, thank you so much. And as she said, we've seen all of you out there, and it means so much because we did put a lot of hard work into it. And I know that the community and even those that are visiting really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
And we do want to highlight our sponsors: Trincara Napa Valley, the City of Santa Elena, the Chamber of Commerce, Copper Cane, Cliff Family, Behringer.
Yes.
We had a list and I totally forgot it. I'm very sorry. Also, we're going to make sure that that part of the press release gets included in the next Santa Elena Star press release. But thank you guys so much. This is incredible, and it's a dream come true, and we're so happy and thankful for your guys' support.
Thank you for all you're doing. It's a wonderful event. Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
I'm Anthony McKell, 1125 Cornell. I wanted to tell the council that 2 weeks ago I met with Congressman Thompson over Caltrans' proposal to tear down our bridges. He's already written a letter to the Caltrans, but he told me he needs a letter from the city asking for his help because they're going to spend federal monies. And the same thing came from Bill Dodd's office. They said the city needs to be the front person. They can't do something for me calling them because I could be a crackpot or whatever. But anyway, but if the city is concerned, please write to these people because they're willing to help us. Number two, David Knutson asked me to canvass Park, Cornella, and Pratt over the letter you sent to the county asking restrictions on Pratt Avenue Bridge. I did that today. I got over 40 signatures that are in favor of what the city wants to do, and I've given it already to Xenia. So I didn't make copies for all you, but she has it if you want to look at all the signatures, because I understand you're going to agendize that and have a resolution maybe, and this is hopefully some support. And the letter I did goes to Diane Dillon. I'll be mailing that tomorrow to her, to our supervisor. Third thing is, I've been up here a bunch of times trying to promote a project on Adams, but I just want to promote the amphitheater. I'm hoping that, I understand in January, the City Council may have Nolan Tam come back for the proposals for City Hall Library. And where the amphitheater sits, if you remember the drawing, is way out of those proposals. It's on the south side of the path that goes down there, which would be out of a future hotel or any other development. All we're asking is to be able to come for more than 4 minutes, provide drawings, information, and everything about this amphitheater we want to build. And it's probably a $5 to $7 million project that's free to the city, basically. It's to bring people more into town again and promote, more businesses hopefully will thrive and everything will be good. And all we're asking is a chance to build this for the city, we hope. And like I said, it's not out of the realm of Nolan Tam's project. So I hope you would consider, when you have that meeting over all these other proposals, you would let us just come and propose it. You can deny it. It's fine. But we just want to show you what we want to build for the city. That's all we're asking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So my understanding from Mr. Presswich is it January 8th is the meeting where the Nolan Tam material is going to come back?
There's an item on tonight's agenda where we'll discuss that in more detail.
Okay, so is that a time that we could talk about possibly bringing this forward?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Craig Bond, Valley View Street. I just want to support Anthony in this idea for an amphitheater. I'm the director of the Choral Society here in town, and I know that it would be a great thing to have for us. I've talked to the band people, the community band. They think it's a fabulous idea for doing some outdoor concerts. The drama people, I've talked to them, and they're just real excited about the possibility. So I'm just here to lend my support for that project, and I hope you'll be able to get it on your agenda for your next meeting.
Thank you.
And Tom has something to say.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to back up both Craig and Anthony, the crackpot there, and tell you that I think this amphitheater would be a wonderful addition to the city of St. Helena. It doesn't affect your other plans for City Hall and so on and so forth, but it would be just a great addition to the city, and it wouldn't cost you a dime. It'd be used heavily by people in good weather, and I think you should seriously consider it. I don't know if you have to agendize it or what the process is, but be sure and give it some serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Bond, thank you for another wonderful Christmas concert this year. It was fantastic. Yes.
Mike Griffin, Park Street. On Anthony's deal here about the Pratt Avenue Bridge, I came here, I believe it was the May 3rd meeting, and we tried to get city staff and police chief and everything to have a meeting and everything. I guess that kind of fell on deaf ears, but with his legwork, 40-plus signatures and more to come because some people weren't home. I'm an ex-retired fireman from St. Helena here, close to 30 years, and I can't tell you how many times I went down there on vehicle accidents and bicycles and pulled maimed people out of cars, some dead, some very bad, died later, whatever the case may be. And there's a big issue down there, and I don't know if this city isn't talking to the county or what, but I understand that the bridge is the county. So if the county's the issue and they won't talk to us on these issues of no left turns on and off the bridge and basically the same restrictions that the city put on the Pope Bridge, because the city owns Pope Bridge, but I guess they don't own Pratt. I mean, who's to say that we got to keep Pratt Avenue open? Let's put 2 K-rails down there, and if the county won't deal with it, then we'll just close it off. And everybody can be happy and everybody be safe. But something has to be happening here, and with a resolution, I know with Dave, I've talked to him a little bit about it. Something's got to be done here before they open that bridge. I guess there was a stall on some of the work or whatever, and it's still closed off. But when they implemented restrictions on Pope Street, the traffic tripled in the Cronulla Park area subdivision. Everybody that used to turn with trucks and stuff on Pope Street now go to Pratt Avenue when it was open. And they came up, they can't get out of on the main street from Pratt Avenue, which you well know, and that's been a 3-year issue that's nothing been dealt with that intersection. And they come down to this subdivision to Cronulla to get on the main street to get into town. So by opening this up again is really going to be a can of worms to start all over again. But I think we need to get with the county and get some of these limitations put on the bridge. And like I say, if they don't work with us, they can't make us keep it open. Let's block it off. And they can have their Silverado Trail. As far as emergency access out there, it doesn't work. The police departments use that when there's accidents in a tree tunnel. And within 20 minutes, the traffic is bumper to bumper backed up all the way into Cronulla onto Main Street because nobody will let anybody out on the trail. So it's so congested down there, nothing seems to be working. So I think we need to get a resolution going here with the county and get on these restrictions, and so everybody can be safe, because it's going to be on someone's shoulders if you want to wake up and your neighbor gets killed down there because it doesn't get done here. It needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Dervin. First, I want to say we have a fabulous, beautiful sidewalk on Hunt Avenue, which I have used many times and enjoyed, so thank you, City, for that. I'm here tonight to ask you to put the question of hotel development on Adams Street on the next regular City Council agenda. At the July 23rd City Council meeting, concerns were raised regarding the resurgence of discussions that intimated selling some of Adams Street for hotel development. At the 22 minutes and 47 seconds mark, Councilmember Knudsen stated, and I quote, "I'd like to add an agenda item to review the visioning that's been done in the past and update that regarding the Adams Street parcel that would be separate from our finance discussions that we're currently having." Mr. Knudsen added, "It's a city asset. It would be great to understand positive visions that have been associated with the property that citizens have been looking for." A vote was taken that determined yes, it was to be put on a future agenda. That never happened. Hotel development to help finance multi-million-dollar projects that may not even be wanted by the majority of St. Helena citizens would be nearly criminal. How is it possible the city would consider stripping assets and destroying the commons to spend millions of dollars on civic buildings the community has not asked for? Before deploying yet another group of people to evaluate all this stuff, one fundamental question needs to be asked and answered: is Adams Street for sale or not? It's a huge elephant in the living room, and it has been for years. The elephant is starting to feel more like a herd. It's ridiculous. You guys say you want to know what people want, and you're listening. And every meeting, there's all these people that come and express all these concerns, and you listen, but you are not hearing. Why don't you put it for a vote? It's too big of an issue to go forward evaluating finance options and resource options if, when the rubber meets the road, there's going to be another huge pushback over hotel development on Adams Street. It's not fair to the community. It's not even fair to you guys, whether you realize it or not. You're like hamsters in a spinning wheel. It's kind of sad. And I don't mean to be rude or aggressive, but frankly, I don't know what incarnation is going on with this town. You have a historical society that wants to build something that would be a community benefit and asset and pay for the whole thing themselves. You have an amphitheater group that wants to build a beautiful amphitheater that would be a community asset and pay for the whole thing themselves. You have a farmer's market that wants to come back to Adams Street, draw people in instead of losing a bunch of people because either it's too far out or there's not enough parking. You have millions of dollars being offered to you for public community/cultural buildings at no cost to the city, and yet you're looking for ways to drum up $20 to $45 million. Come on, people, let's get real. You didn't take care of the library. You didn't take care of City Hall. Now they're starting to look like throwaway buildings. That's just not right. It's not environmentally conscious. It's not civic-minded. It does not reflect the great reputation we want this city to have. We want to be a people-friendly, community-oriented, semi-rural destination where people can come and do something, not just drive through, which they do all the time. So I purposely didn't write the whole thing out because sometimes I think we need to let our emotions show and just go for it. So I'm going for it.
Thank you.
I'm not done.
Well, the time is up.
Okay, 1A should be on the options, and it's not. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will, if there's no more additional public comment, we will move on to reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. We will begin with our city attorney, Kara.
I don't have a
Ueda.
report. Thank you.
that was
Oh, no report. Okay. Mr. Prestwich,
No report. Thank you.
our finance director.
Thank you. Just another reminder that starting in January, we are transitioning to the bi-monthly billing for our utility billing cycle. All the information is available on our website, or feel free to call City Hall and we can provide as much information as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our city clerk.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any reports from our directors in the?
I will be quick. I know you have a full agenda tonight. I just wanted to invite everyone to the library at 6:30 on Thursday. Of course, after you go to Jingle All the Way. We will have Christmas carolers, the merry old Christmas carolers. They are costume in Dickensian, sorry, tongue twister there, Dickensian attire, and they come with finger cymbals, sleigh bells, tambourines, kazoos, so it should be a nice evening.
Thank you. Any additional comments from directors? Our planning department?
Nothing to report.
Public Works?
Just to update that the county alerted us that they'll be opening the Pratt Bridge this Friday. We haven't received an update. We're waiting for our Nixle report so we can match the message up here in the city of St. Helena and alert our residents and community of the developments. We're also working on a draft resolution to bring back to council the first meeting in January, if not sooner.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Chatel?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Knudsen?
So either 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the Pratt Bridge and the fact that our the Public Works Director's communication with the county transportation people didn't go anywhere. I left a message for Diane. I talked to her staff. We talked about, as a council, addressing this question by having a resolution possibly. And now we discover that the county is going to open it without us having a chance to say anything. And what we said in the letter was, let's not have left turns on those lanes. I'm very concerned about someone dying at the end. And maybe that seems, like talking too much, but this is a good example of, we talked about agendizing it. Have we run out of time? What can we do to actually impact something that has a huge import to our community before the county makes decisions without input from the citizens of the county that actually live in the city? And this is very disturbing to hear, actually. And we were going to agendize it, and I don't know what to do.
Is this something that can be brought forward?
We can schedule a special meeting with a 24-hour notice. And so we can do that. Thursday morning would be the earliest date.
Yeah.
Can I say something on this point? I happened to be in another meeting today with Steve Litterer at the county, who did tell me that the Pratt was going to open on Friday. He also said they either are or intend to propose
Mary,
truck.
I think we can't get into this right now, is my understanding from the city attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I would advise that if we do schedule a special meeting, we can have a full discussion on all this and all the points can be brought up.
Okay.
But I would be in favor of that. I know that everybody's busy.
I was going to report what I learned today, but when it's my turn to talk, can I do that then? Okay.
Okay. So I'll move on to Ms. Koberstein. Sorry.
Okay. What I intended to say was he told me that the county either has or intends to propose truck restrictions on the bridge, which would have something impact, I imagine, on the traffic, the amount and type of traffic that could be on the bridge. So I don't know if we've received those restrictions yet, but that was what I learned today.
Thank you. Is any other additional? Sorry. Mr. Doring? No report. Okay. I have a few items. First of all, on Thursday, the 12th, there'll be the Our Lady of Guadalupe parade gathering at 4:30 at the cemetery and coming down Spring Street up to Oak Street and up to Tainter. That gathering begins at 4:30, and then the parade starts at 5 and comes down Spring. It's a nice community holiday event. So if folks want to meet at the cemetery, 4:30 on the 12th. I want to continue to remind folks about Club 25. That's where we drive the speed limit 25 or the safer speed below to continue trying to make or maintain our town as a pedestrian and bicycle friendly town. If we take it upon ourselves to make sure that we are making complete stops at intersections and keeping watch for kids, cyclists, and pedestrians, and driving with the assumption that somebody might jump out in front of us, I think we'll all get a little more control in town. And then one other thing I wanted to ask about, and I don't know if this is a city council thing, a city manager question, or city attorney, but when we're at meetings at the county, at the supervisor's chambers, or at the NVTA Transportation Authority, we have microphones that have a light that the chair can see, and it may be in terms of maintaining structure in a conversation so that I can recognize if somebody hits the button. And in the supervisors, I believe the chair has a pattern of lights so they can see who's lighted. So I guess we can do it here, but I just didn't know if there was an easier way or something that's a box here so I can see if we're in the middle of a conversation over here.
Those are nice technology items to have that are simply an investment. We would need to work with the school district and or look for other alternatives that could be available. But essentially, council members punch up and the chair can acknowledge and see in advance without having to look around to notice that someone would like to comment on an item.
For me, I mean, I like a conversational style, but I also want to make sure we're maintaining structure in the meeting. So it's something that I've seen at the supervisors and at the NVTA. So I just wanted to think of if it's something to consider. So with that, I will move to our consent calendar. And these consent items are where members of...
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a staff briefing on Upper York Creek.
That's right. I'm sorry. So we'll move to Ms. Smithies.
I believe the updates for Upper York Creek are in our consent calendar, but progress is happening. We have a proposed professional services agreement tonight that we'll discuss later, as well as an RFQ package that's also on the consent agenda, and we're also still on track to submit permits for the incomplete project in early January.
Very good. And then on the wastewater treatment plant?
I will be meeting with Finance Director Mitz either this week or pretty soon to discuss the financial plan that we'll be bringing to council on January 14th.
And that plan is coming in on the 14th?
Yes.
Very good.
It's critical in order to move the project forward, to have the financial plan in place so the state can see how we're going to pay for the proposed upgrades.
Okay, we'll move on now to consent items where members of the council or public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion or public comment, Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. I'm going to read the numbers, and if anybody would like one pulled, they may let me know. So we'll start with 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.9, and we are going to pull 8.10. So seeing no, sorry about that. 8.11 and 8.12. So seeing, we'll pull 8.10, and then I would seek a motion on the remainder.
Move approval of the remainder of the consent calendar.
I second.
Roll call, please.
We need to wait a second, I think. Council's conferring. Are we okay?
Good.
Okay.
So roll call.
Vice Chair Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen,
Aye.
Councilmember Koberstein,
Yes.
and Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. So we'll circle back to 8.10. This is consideration and proposed adoption of a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Britain Tree Services Incorporated for partial tree removal for the Upper York Creek Ecosystem Restoration and Aquatic Habitat Enhancement Project, CIP number W-26, for an amount not to exceed $101,300, and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. And this is Ms. Smithies.
Yes, thank you.
Before we start, I'd like to say congratulations to Chief Hartley.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Doring. Congratulations, and also welcome to our new planning director.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
yeah. I was going to say we just need to read out those two items, 8.7 and 8.8, the titles. And
Okay. Okay, so shall I do that now? Yeah, okay. 8.7 is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving an employment agreement with Christopher Hartley and ratifying the city manager's appointment to serve as the police chief, and in accordance with California Code Section 54953C3, the recommended final action for police chief beginning December 10th, 2019 provides for an annual base salary of $145,869 with the following benefits: use of a city vehicle, deferred compensation, city match of up to $200 per month, health benefits consistent with the benefits offered to other employees of the city, and will receive retirement benefits at a classic member formula of 3% at 50, final compensation based on highest 12-month period. And then I will move to 8.8. Consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving an employment agreement with Maya de Rosa and ratifying the city manager's appointment to serve as the planning and building director. And in accordance with California Code Section 54953C3, the recommended final action for planning and building director beginning January 13th, 2020 provides for an annual base salary of $170,061 a month. $170,061 with the following benefits: vehicle allowance of $200 per month, deferred compensation city match of up to $200 per month, health benefits consistent with the benefits offered to other employees of the city, and will receive retirement benefits at a new member PEPRA formula of 2% at 62, final compensation based on highest average during a 36 consecutive months period. Okay, so now we're going to move on to 8.10.
Yes, thank you. On the dais here in front of all you should be a revised professional services agreement with Britain Services for $58,680, as well as a resolution revising the total cost. Originally, when we proposed this project with Britain Tree Services and negotiated the cost, we were under the impression we were starved for redwood trees, and we had an opportunity to cut down 2 trees within our own back buildings that still need to come down behind the teen center and the public works offices building. But with the movement, with potential of PG&E bringing us logs at either a zero cost or a little cost for hauling them up to our lower res as a stationing, it seemed just prudent to talk to Britain Tree Services and renegotiate these 2 trees coming down, because it would be a total of about $60,000 of this contract going to 2 trees when we have 10 trees coming down for $43,000 at the York Creek Dam, which is the critical portion of this project. So it was fast. I finally got feedback from them yesterday or today on the revised costs, and we chose to eliminate it just because due diligence on the city part to save money on this project and negotiate later on those 2 trees coming down. But also keep in there about a $15,000 contingency fund in case they encounter any issues on the project in January when they're proposed to do this project. I didn't provide this earlier, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services has liked the drafts that we provided them, which was sent in last week. So they're the ones that will be allowing for this work to start in early January. So we're on schedule, if this is approved tonight, as revised on the dais, for $58,680 for Britain Tree Services to start in January once the permits are in hand and awarded and accepted by City Council.
And once again, the cost was $58,680.
$15,000 of that is contingency, just in case. It has to be in writing and pre-approved prior to them starting the work. For any of those changes, like it happens in construction or projects on the go, we don't want to stop anything to come back to council because we have only the month of January to remove those trees. And to remind everyone, this is so we can get started on the Upper York Creek project in June instead of August because of tree migration and northern spotted owl.
Very good. Are there any initial questions from council?
I have a question on the 2 ones that are on the property behind the teen center. Is there a time frame that they have to come down, and why? Is it because they're going to come down, or
they were already noticed a while ago? We were just waiting on costs from Britain Services. It was a cheaper cost than initially revised because they weren't going to have to carry 20-foot logs lengths up to the Upper York Creek Dam. And also because we're trying to preserve the logs instead of chipping all the limbs and brush. So it'll probably be cheaper. It'll probably come down at a later time in the spring. And it's still a possibility they could be repurposed on the sediment traps for the Upper York Creek Dam. But right now, I think the critical piece is the part that's on the dam that's subject to permits.
Any other council questions? I will open the public comment. Any public comment, questions? I will close the public comment and bring it back to council. If there's no additional comment or question, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the recommended action with the change, which I believe has been made to paragraph H of the recitals to correct the contract amount, and item number 1, so that the amount is $58,680.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
yes?
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, we will move off our consent calendar into public hearings, and we will begin with 9.1. This is consideration and proposed approval of the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District. Number 1, MSD annexation number 137, 1057 Pratt Avenue, St. Helena, California, 94574, APN 009-142-003. And this is Ms. Smithies again.
Yes, this project originally went to Planning Commission in August 2015. However, the project was put on hold until the upgrades completed by Los Alcabas were taking place at the Cronulla Pump Station, which was putting a 6-inch force main down the railroad tracks and tying into railroad, which was a less compromised, or not compromised, but it had had more additional capacity to it versus Main Street, which we know is inundated with additional sewer laterals and tie-ins. There was more capacity on railroads, so they completed that work. And then the property owner at that time brought it to the planning commission or to move forward their project, but they ended up selling the property. And then a new parcel owner came on board, and they had to go back to the whole planning review process. And it's a requirement and condition their project is annexed into the city. Their project will tie into the main on Pratt Avenue, and then which also ties into the Cornell pump station. And if you recall, we did a white paper in 2018 for 1045 Pratt. They indicate this project was one of the other ones to be completed prior to the Criminella pump station being upgraded.
Are there initial questions from council?
I have a question for staff. So I think I heard you correctly that you wanted to make this connection before upgrading the Cornella pump station, and why?
Because they've been part of the process for over 4 years now, going probably into 5 years. They were told they couldn't tie in until Los Alcabas, and then Los Alcabas upgraded their plant, and then the property owner at the time had to go back through Planning Commission to get an extension on the project through design review. And then at that time, they sold the property, and now we have a new property owner, changed design on the project, and now we're moving forward. Last year, there was concerns about this project or any new tie-ins, and a part of the condition was to identify what other properties were in process already, and this one was one of the projects identified to be tied in the near future. Meanwhile, while the Cornell pump station was in design.
So I know this isn't on Ms. Ueda. Maybe you can tell me if I'm allowed to have this comment, but they seem to be so intertwined. The fact that we're adding capacity to the Cornella pump station, but we're still in design with Cornella pump station. Is there a way to accelerate the design and implementation of what I understand is a closed loop system for the Cornella pump station? As we are adding more capacity, we're forcing this existing from what I understand, substandard system to handle additional capacity. Can we tie this in? Yeah.
There was no question that the capacity to handle at the current Cornell pump station is the odor issue. That's the ongoing issue that needs to be upgraded. We've been trying to implement measures since the white paper was introduced last year. And I believe it's been successful, though I heard recent feedback that it was still odors come up every once in a while out there. I've only recently heard that back in October from one of the members that are in the audience. But that has been the only complaints I've received recently, other than a Bay Area Quality Management District inspector came by as well as recently as 2 weeks ago from complaints that have been heard. But it was the first time we'd received any of those complaints in over a year.
Yeah, the challenge is the back, whatever the air gap that we all have in our bathroom systems that are in our own homes, is that we have gaps and so if there are problems at the pump station, those odors can travel back through the pipes and up into the around the bathroom vent pipes themselves and the kitchen vent pipes and all those vent pipes. And so I'm just hoping that we can get to a place where the design improvements for the Cornella pump station are also accelerated as we add additional. I mean, that was my fellow council member Ms. Koberstein remembers this well. One of the issues with the dormitory on Pratt Avenue was the idea that they were all going to be moving that sewage through the pump station, which couldn't, perhaps from a flow perspective, could handle it, but from an odor and other problems could not handle it. And so maybe we can help to accelerate the pump station improvements even while we make these sorts of additions to the system. But I don't want to get outside the lane that we're considering today.
If I might add that we do have a design review application in with the Planning Commission that because of different cancellations this past month. We're not able to get on the docket until the first meeting in January or the second meeting in January. Vacations and holidays intervened on that, but the design is coming to Planning Commission in January.
Can you talk a little bit about the sort of the timeline of both of these projects? So the project, the pump station improvements, what timeline is that to be completed? And then just a sort of a general idea as to how it would follow if we did do an annexation. How long would that generally take? And that system to process that, to connect, to do all those things. Is the sewer main is all that already built out, and it's just a matter of paying a fee, or is there more construction by the project applicant for the annexation itself?
It was
trying to figure out compare the two.
It was a condition of their building permit.
I understand that.
So,
but I'm just trying to see whether we can do both, or is one going to lead ahead of the other one? Will the annexation be first and come and contribute to an issue that's already pre-existing, or will the pump station be repaired, upgraded, whatever needs to be done to deal with this odor problem? Can we do both is what I think Councilmember Knutson is trying to ascertain, and I also am concerned about that. Or is one going to be a year out? I mean, when are we going to get it done? I guess this pump station upgrade has been hanging around for a long time, and frankly, there have been a lot of complaints over many years prior to October. So I'm starting to feel the pressure out there, and we need to deal with that. And I'm very sympathetic to the Cornell community. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the timing.
I'd like to have Erica talk just briefly about the process related to the Cornell pump station, and then April and I will talk about the finances.
So we have 65% plans, 90% plans are coming this month. We will be taking it to Planning Commission in January. And if we move forward from the Planning Commission, we're probably going to have 100% plans and potentially bring approval of design of those bid and project specs by the late second meeting in February and get it on the streets. The other second part of that is how do we finance that and the wastewater treatment plant upgrades.
I'll cover that, but also could you address the timeline associated with the improvements on this specific property?
I would say that would probably be up to the applicant and how quickly their contractor can build their structure, but this is the only item holding up their building permit. So if they could start construction, they have to grade the site. Not recommended, especially with all the rain weather we're having right now. But I would say a good 6 months to a year is when their project would be coming online. I think on 1045 Pratt just came online about 9 months after we permitted it. They came in mid-June or mid-summer.
That's helpful.
I'm going to thank you. Oh, Mr. Presswich, you have a comment?
So just briefly on the financing, the big project, there are two projects that are affecting the wastewater fund. The most significant project is the wastewater treatment plant, and that project is we've come closer to, I think, identifying a number that we think is a reliable number. And that number is in the $12 million range. Is that accurate? And we are having active and have had active conversations in the last week or week and a half with bond counsel related to our capacity to fund that particular improvement. And frankly, it's very, very narrow. The numbers associated with delivering that project without additional resources is very narrow, and it's raising the question of whether it's compromising the timing on the Cornell pump station absent new funding. And so we're actively analyzing that right now, and that's why we intend to come back on January 14th with information on the financing of really both projects.
And what
can you clarify what you mean by very narrow? I'm not sure I understand.
So we believe we have the ability to borrow just about what we need to deliver the wastewater treatment plant. But when you add an additional $1 million project onto that, the Cornell pump station, it raises a question about whether we can deliver both projects at the same time and absent additional funding. So we don't know the answer to those questions until we actually go out to bid. We would need formal bids to really truly understand numbers, but we've had some positive conversations recently with the bond counsel associated with the delivery of the $12 million wastewater treatment plant. So there is an ability to advance the Cronulla pump station now at the risk of slowing down the larger wastewater treatment plant project. But we anticipate having better data for you in about a month.
Thank you. Ms. Coberstein, do you have a question? I'll open it up just a second.
No, he answered the question.
I'm going to open the public forum. So, Mr. Griffin?
Mike Griffin, Pratt Avenue. I'm the one that's been complaining and everything since, I'd say about 1991. So I don't know what Cronulla Pump Station has to do with the wastewater treatment plant. This problem was way before the wastewater treatment plant you guys ever talking about. I can remember a half a dozen years ago that other cities were coming here to tour that place because it was a state-of-the-art treatment plant. It just wasn't maintained. So the issue there, Cronulla has been there quite some time. And the smell hasn't gone away. I've got the air pollution involved in it now. And they've been out to my place 6 times now monitoring the smell, along with down at that pump station. And they're going to continue to do it as long as I call them. I've called since 1991 the city staff, police department, whatever. Once in a while somebody comes out where you get a song and dance of what's going on. I personally right now recently have seen the city vacuum truck go down there and suck 3 truckloads of stuff out of that thing to take it down to the sewer ponds and dump it. They say that's maintenance. It's not maintenance. The bucket's full. And it's flowing over probably. That's why they're in emergency getting it out of there. You have a potential to have 17 houses on Pratt Avenue hooked into the Cronulla sewer system there that's still available out there that they could do it. Another 18 houses off of Main Street that could be brought through if they did it like they did one house already on Pratt Avenue, let them go through somebody else's property to get to Cronulla Pump Station. All they look at is the sewer hookup fees, and okay, we're going to get that guy over here, and away it goes. The address that's in this annex thing here should never been approved to start with at day one when they tore the house down at the planning department level and allowed them to abolish the septic system and going to build this plan on. They adopted the plan, said it's okay, got the money for the plans and everything, not knowing how they're going to get the sewer hooked up. You know, now they're going to have to go up the driveway. It's going to be a costly thing for that landowner to pump it up because it doesn't flow down, uphill, all the way over. Now I want to know, is that landowner going to have to pay to extend the city sewer main from the intersection of Park Street at Pratt Avenue down to in front of his easement that comes out because he's a flag lot? And if that's the case, then who's paying for that length of thing? They ought to take it all the way down then and let these other 17 houses hook up, because you guys just going to go looking for the money and you keep putting it in this sewer system that's not made for it. It was made in the 60s, mid-60s. It was illegal for years until I brought it to their attention here quite some time ago. It was an open pit, and you have a toddler park there that if anybody left the door open or didn't lock it, a kid go in there, it'd fall in it, be all over. But you keep putting stuff in this place and not addressing the smell issue. It doesn't overflow that much. It's just the smell. It's unbearable. You can't even stand to be outside of your house sometimes. And, I get the big sewer rates, and I get a bonus. I get the smell factor with it. So I guess I'm paying extra for it. I don't know. So I think you just need to stop anybody from hooking into this thing until it gets fixed. And I think you need to escalate
Mr. Griffin, can you address it to the council up here rather than the staff so that we hear
well,
it? Thank you.
You need to just stop hooking into this thing and escalate fixing that pump station. And like I say, I don't know what ties it has. I don't understand the dollars and figures or whatever. But this issue's been going on since 91. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Additional comment?
I'm Anthony McKelly, 1125 Cronulla. I've been on that corner for 32 years now, born in St. Helena. I remember when all this property was vineyard, and then Mr. Volker put in the subdivision. The pump station was built originally just for the homes in the subdivision. Since then, you've allowed the CIA and previously the convalescent home on Pratt to tie in. You've allowed all those houses on Pratt from this house we're talking about all the way down to the railroad track. Grandview was tied in, but it wasn't Los Cabos that has much more production. And the only thing Los Cabos did, instead of the pumps directing the sewage up Cornella to Maine, they just turned the pipes around to go down Fulton. Nothing has been done to the pumps, the holding tank, or anything about capacity. You could let this house go forward, but not let them hook up until that pump station is finished. And no ifs, ands, or buts. Don't let them give you some song and dance why they have to do it. I mean, you did the thing on the corner of Main and Pratt when those people, the Perriots, had put $14,000 into a sewage system, or their septic system, before they sold the house. New owner goes out and tears it up, but immediately you let them tie into the sewer system because it's an emergency. It was their own fault for doing that, but we let them do that. And this truck that Mike's talking about that goes down there to pump out that tank goes by my house once or twice a week. It's a daily, almost a daily trip. So why is it going there to pump out this tank if it's okay? Obviously, it's not pumping, and the pumps, everything needs to be upgraded. And about a year ago, you had this proposal out there, and I heard from staff it was just too expensive, so we tabled it. Now it's coming back again. I don't know what it was then, but now obviously it's $1 million. And why haven't you asked all these developers that have tied into it for a fee? I mean, it seems like the city lets everybody tie in, you don't get any money, and then the rest of us, all the taxpayers have to pay for it. Where the developer on Pratt that did those 6, 7 homes, Los Cabos just turning the pipe around, I mean, and the CIA, when they tied in, nothing was asked of anybody. And I think you can make that restriction, but you need to upgrade that station. And I've been to Mike's house with the smell. You all should come over, and that's why he's got the Air Pollution Board involved, because he can't get any satisfaction here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you smell it from where you live, Mr. McKelly? I'm just curious as how pervasive it is.
Okay.
I don't doubt that it's at Mr. McGriffin's house, but
It's only the 4 or 5 houses on the corner of Pratt and Park.
Okay.
Hose Martin's house, Mike's house, the next house, and I think Jaime's house are all, why they have this problem, I have no idea. But for some reason, and it is unbearable. I mean, you would not want to be outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back up to council.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes.
really quickly as a reminder, this was a public hearing, so that concludes the public hearing.
Oh,
The close of the public comment
Oh, okay.
period closes the public hearing.
so in this case, do we not bring it back to council for discussion?
Oh, no, you do.
You do?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
it is closing public hearing.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there any initial council comment, question?
Well, I think Mr. McKelly raises an interesting issue, and I guess we need to talk about it, whether we can waive temporarily the condition of the annexation and allow the house to go forward. I'm not sure that's a policy that I've thought through, but that may be a planning issue or a public works issue or a management issue. I don't know whether we can we can sort of postpone. You said it's a condition. Obviously, they can't build a home without satisfying that condition, maybe simultaneously at the same time. I guess, do they have to satisfy that before they can even start building?
Yes.
And would it be unusual or strange or inappropriate to postpone that condition? I understand, I guess, that the septic system has been demolished, so I don't want to have a policy that says, obviously you couldn't get final occupancy unless you had it, so that would be the risk on the developer. Just food for thought. I'm just asking.
Well, I believe they sized the house where I don't believe a septic will fit, and I don't think the county would. That's the issue. They redesigned a house that the septic.
No, I'm not suggesting that
Yeah.
they go back to that. I'm just suggesting that we postpone that condition until we allow them to move forward, but postpone that condition, occupancy or that condition being satisfied until we get the upgrades done at the pump station. That's sort of what I'm talking about.
But why would they want to do that and spend the money on building the house if they weren't guaranteed? We can't tell them timing. I think that would be, I wouldn't want to ask them to do that.
I think this came up in a previous annexation request here, and it also tied into looking at our code and the California plumbing code that we had adopted, and I do not recall the resolution. Maybe our council could advise us of that at the next meeting or something. We could continue the item. I also think, I trust the staff to come back to us with their best recommendation of what to do, depending on what the cost of the wastewater treatment plant is. I have to say for myself, I wouldn't be opposed to having the general fund loan money to the wastewater fund for a period of time, if that's what it takes to satisfy the cash flow for the bond covenants. But I'm sure you're going to have some ideas up your sleeve, and that's something that I could support.
If we, Mr. Knudsen, if this is continued to the next meeting and that information can be put together, Mr. Presters, does that sound a workable time frame, Ms. Smithies?
I know that the applicant's eager for this to move forward, but I'm sure they'd allow it to go to the 14th.
Yeah, they're not going to the Plan Commission until January anyway, right?
For the pump station, correct.
No. I mean the design review for the house is.
It was revised, I believe, a year ago.
Oh, okay. I'm
They've
confused.
been through several planning commissions. The new property owner took it to planning commission.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
So the white paper was before my time, and you're saying that there was one property. Is there another property that's on there that would be recommended that we move forward with?
At the time, we only did the near term properties that we knew were going to connect. They showed the proposed properties. Basically, the consultant said 100 houses could be connected because the same smell is going to surface out of there because it's a limited size pit. But we brought to council to show these are the ones that are near term. If you chose to put a moratorium on any future ones, now what happens if you have an emergency? There's no homes that have a legal way to connect at this point without extending a sewer main. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that happening. It could, but that's why we provided the homes that we knew of at the time a year and a half ago, that were near term. Like this one was delayed, and I did want to correct that we did upsize the forced main pipe that went to Fulton to Railroad. It's now a 6-inch, whereas the original one was 4-inch to the main street. So that's why we identified this home in addition, because we knew it had already been approved through design review.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that pipe is bigger, so the flow is fine. What the problem is that if one more house goes online, will the smell be greater?
They also said the smell would stay the same because it's the same surface area that's evacuating out of the pit. The pit hasn't changed.
It's an open air pit, unfortunately, Ms. Chateau, which it's going to smell.
But is it going to smell more than now? Because I want to move forward with the fixes, but I also want to honor if these people have been waiting for this long. If one more house isn't going to impact the smell, I'd like to move forward for them.
I think that makes sense. I think I get your point. If it's not bringing the smell up and it's not a flow issue,
which we've heard, it's not a flow issue. If it's not a smell issue, we need to address the bigger fix. But I think also we could move forward with this one.
Any thoughts?
So I have a additional thought, and then I wonder if we could also, as our deliberations continue, perhaps we could open public comment again. We've raised a couple of issues here. Is that it seems like that the fix to the Cronulla pump station is not simply about making it a closed system. It's an open system right now, and I'm no sewer expert at all, but it's an open system now, and part of the upgrades are making it a closed system. Is part of the challenges now, Ms. Smithies, that they are having to actually pull effluent out of that pit rather than allow it to head down the railroad tracks as it's supposed to?
They do have to periodically clean it if like any sludges or greases are accumulate at the bottom of the pit. I'm not aware of them going twice a week out to the pump station. I want to clarify that with staff. I don't have that information at my fingertips this evening. I do know we had issues early this year that we couldn't pinpoint. We were doing our grease check violations at not violations but grease checks at Los Alcabas and the CIA headquarters to figure out why were we getting this sludge carry down.
I mean, the deja vu moment for me thinking about the CIA expansion project was the fact that these days, compared to when the pump station was built, everyone has low-flow toilets, people have low-flow showers, there's just much less water moving the product through the system. And so therefore having a more efficient and effective system to allow it to move is, you know, these old systems aren't engineered for the way that we've fortunately figured out a way to reduce our water consumption, and that has impacted our wastewater systems. And we got a Godspeed, if that's the right term, on this pump station. I think it's imperative. At the same time, I also think, you know, good for us, because we've made it a policy to encourage people not to septic, to instead, if they can, to connect to our sewage line, particularly those in the city. But are we properly charging folks for this connection? I don't know what our charges are.
So, are there any thoughts from Mr. Doring, Ms. Coberstein at this point? Do we have is there a motion, one way or the other, a thought on a value of continuance or moving forward if this one project is not going to increase the smell?
If I can get to the number, I'll make a motion. Is that what you're asking for right now?
Yeah, if there's a motion one way or the other on either continuing it or moving forward with it.
So I move that we consider and propose approval. I move that we approve the annexation of the territory into the St. Helena Sewer District. Do I have to read the number?
Is there any additional discussion or a second?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
I don't know if it has to be seconded first.
It does need a second.
That we ask the staff to look into the other issues we've discussed tonight.
Councilmember Coberstein, is your microphone on?
Sorry. That we ask the staff to review the other issues we raised tonight and bring it back to us to determine whether we should, I don't know if moratorium is the right word, or whether we can continue to move forward at this pace or we need to stop.
Okay, thank you. Do I second her?
No, if it's an amendment, you would need to accept the amendment.
Yes, I accept.
And then we have the second, so we'll move to a roll call. Oh.
Is discussion closed now?
I don't believe so, until I think it's still open.
So I'm happy with the amendment, Ms. Coberstein. I think that's fantastic. I wonder if we could, with all due haste, I don't necessarily think the amendment needs a date certain, but I want to talk about this in mid-January if we can, about the Cronulla pump station improvements.
Is that something that can come back?
My understanding is the continuation of this item would occur at the next meeting. That's January 14th. That's the same date that we've previously identified for a conversation about the Cronulla pump station. I'm sorry, the financing for the wastewater treatment plant, which actually includes references to the Cronulla pump station financing, because that's part of the conversation.
So we can move forward with this.
So that's on the next agenda already?
That's planned for January 14th.
So, Mr. Doring?
I just would like to have a conversation at that time about the potential use of general funds to expedite that project, at least as something to discuss. And I think you intended that. I hope. Okay.
Okay. Very good. So I think we're ready for a roll call on this.
Just to clarify, will there be two motions?
No, there's one motion that was amended.
Okay. Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes. Well,
It's me first.
Shut up. Mary seconded.
start with her.
She made the motion.
So, Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
And Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Very good. So we'll move on now. Thank you. We'll move on now to item 9.2. This is consideration and proposed adoption of a resolution approving the 5-year Measure T expenditure plan for fiscal year 2020 through 2021 through fiscal year 2024 through 2025 and certifying the maintenance of effort, MOE, amount of $379,189 as required by Measure T ordinance and agreement, Napa Countywide Road Maintenance Act. And this is again Ms. Smithies.
Yes, thank you. As hopefully everyone's been looking at the maps and or the list of streets that are concluded, that does not include the streets that have been designed and or constructed this year and or proposed to be started and advertised later this next spring, which is the year 1920 project streets. So just from the 5-year plan map, you can see that a lot of streets are going to be touched in the next 5 years, and we're going to be making a lot of headway on improving our pavement condition index, which right now is at 56, but I'm hoping that the next year during the next inspection round, we will be moving up. This list is comprised of use of software, on-site review of the streets that are, proposed from the Street Saver program, as well as what priorities that the city has come up with in the last year. And there's been several streets we identified to move up on the street listing that may not have been identified in the Street Saver program, and or leveraging, if it shows it's a computer program. So if it says, do Cornello Drive one section here and do the next one in 2 years, you're going to try to combine those. We did that on Spring Street from Valley View to White Cliff, the city limits this year, where it had several different segments proposed over several years. And it's like you want to get that whole stretch done at the same time. So we did some of that moving around. We have an aggressive list in the next 3 years. If there's project savings this year, from this year as well as next year, it's the potential that we can get a lot more of these projects done in the aggressive mode we've shown, which is like 1.4 to 1.6 in the next 3 years. But it's also, there's a chance as soon as this is approved, we're going to be submitting this 5-year list to PG&E and our other utility partners, because we don't want to be tearing up these streets as soon as we've paved them. We have a 5-year moratorium on anything over an inch overlay, and a 3-year moratorium on anything that's a microsurface kind of preventative maintenance, which we've done a mix of both this year. We did microsurfacing and overlays. So in addition, we did sidewalk cap closures. So we've also added in this list a citywide traffic safety program on an annual basis, as well as stormwater. That way, if we get hit with a known maintenance, or like someone would like, a priority gets risen about safety concern on a certain intersection, we can implement some traffic safety guidelines that we don't normally have in our operations budget on an annual basis, and it's Measure T coverable. In addition to the, coming up with this list, we had a meeting, we had our subcommittee appointed earlier last year in our work plan. The mayor and vice mayor were on it and reviewed the draft list. It went to the Measure T Oversight Committee last week. There was no questions on the list, and it passed. But just because we have a 5-year program doesn't mean the priorities can't move and shift. A perfect example this year, Kearney Avenue was supposed to be paved. Then all of a sudden PG&E said, hey, we actually needed to replace the gas main on Kearney. So we moved that street out to 1920 and moved up some of the streets into 1819's project budget this following year. So there's some of that kind of movement going to happen. If something needs to get prioritized that's on the list, it can get moved up. If there's something we need to identify that's not on this list, we just need to bring it back to City Council for a public hearing and add that street list before we start any work, just so it's covered in the next baseline. So with that, I'll leave it to you if you have any questions.
Are there any initial council questions?
I'm just a little confused by the mapping and the text. What exactly is happening to the Grayson, South Crane, and the Sulphur Springs? it's going to design initially in 2020?
So in 1920, we proposed a design only of Grayson and South Crane. I currently have some proposals on my desk to review and bring back to council probably by late January, early February on award, if we like either of the consultants that we have submitted, and start design. The goal is to hopefully go into construction on South Crane in the following fiscal year, if I believe.
Well, yeah, it's shown as 20 to 21 for the construction, the red line.
Yes.
And what about Sulphur Springs? Is that is okay as far as the pavement index goes?
Sulphur Springs is another reconstruction project. So reconstructions aren't right now because we have so many streets that are in the poor to fair condition, which is the critical condition before they start going to this reconstruction section, that we've identified South Crane and Grayson as projects we want to move forward now. If we want to move up Sulphur Springs, we can add that in the next 2-year round, see where our budgets are. But we were trying to maximize what we could do at the time, and the time was South Crane and Grayson were critical streets because of the primary school. I recognize Sulphur Springs is also one of those streets that needs to be done at some point. But it's like, how many can we move up in the first 5 years and actually build?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who takes that route to get to my house because it's easier than coming in to Main Street. And I feel for those people who live on Sulphur Springs because the condition of the road makes it noisy when you're traveling down it. And just in the number of houses, there's many more homes and people who are right there on White Sulphur Springs than South Crane and Grayson, and I think they're all equally deserving, but you only got so much money, you do what you can do. But I trust your judgment, but I think that street, at some point, we have to address it.
The other goal is that we have these 2 streets designed, and then we have a potential of another One Bay Area grant like Main Street. The Grayson Avenue was the second project it was the alternate for the Main Street project. So there's a potential for another grant opening, federal aid grant in the next year or 2 round cycle that we could apply for this. And hopefully because of the primary school and the high school, it would be an easy cinch and we'd already have it designed. So the goal is that hopefully we set ourselves up for leveraging federal aid funds or other state grant funds that we can come online to help offset that, and then we can move Sulphur Springs up in there.
And is it my understanding that this is what we're submitting for Measure T, and that if changes do have to be made or we decide to make changes, we can go back later and present those?
Yes, at any time we can go back to public hearings. Some agencies went back as soon as the first meeting with changes to their list after the 2 years ago.
Okay. Any additional questions?
A comment to staff. Really good job on the Spring Street to the end of the line. It's really impressive, and a lot of people, I don't want to use a Trumpian phrase. Many citizens have commented to me, people are saying that they're, they're psyched. So I can't wait for this plan to come to fruition.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to open the public comment.
Hi. Excuse me, I'm just getting over the flu like everybody's had. Roberta Oswald, 1399 St. James Drive. I also happen to be the president of the St. Helena Park Homeowners Association, which is 65 units that are right there off of Mitchell. And I've been keeping an eye on the plan for Mitchell, but would appreciate if you would keep in mind that St. Helena Park has a lot of streets that are off of Mitchell, like Voorhees. We have some Voorhees Circle. We have Hasty Court. Well, that's actually off to St. James, but there's a number of them that we also are looking at needing to resurface, and had thought about timing it along with the Mitchell project. So if that moves around, or if there's some switching, if you could try to give us as much notice as possible so that we can also work with whoever the city has chosen to do that work, that would be awesome, because we thought it, like you did with doing the whole street, let's make it all wonderful at the same time. Okay.
So is it my understanding that these streets are maintained by the Homeowners Association?
Yes. Yes.
So just wanting in this instance to coordinate to make sure they get done at the same
Exactly.
time. Okay.
Yeah,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Any additional public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the council. Any thoughts?
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
And do we have a roll call?
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto,
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen,
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein,
Yes.
and Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. So at this point, we're going to move, at the suggestion of the city manager, to the new business section, and then we will return after that to the old business section. So we'll now go to the new business, 11.1. This is notice of intent to sell affordable housing unit at 1636 Voorhees Circle, and direction as to whether the city desires to exercise its option to purchase said property. And this will be presented by our planning department. Aaron?
Thank you, Mayor. So on November 18th, 2019, the city received notice that the homeowner of 1636 Voorhees Circle intends to sell the home. As an owner-occupied affordable housing unit, the property was sold to the current owner subject to resale restriction agreement and option to purchase agreement. And this agreement gives the city the opportunity to exercise an option to purchase the property. And should the city wish to exercise that option, the city would need to be prepared to purchase the home at the fair market value or the restricted sales price of $370,482, whichever is lower. If the city does not decide the option to buy, the sale by the owner would proceed under the resale agreement restrictions that were written in the year 2000. One factor to consider in the city's decision whether to exercise the option is that it must be exercised by January 1st, 2020. And it should be noted that the current owner has an interested purchaser for the home, and this person is a first-time home buyer who currently lives and works in St. Helena. And the income eligibility of this prospective buyer has not yet been completed, but I was informed by Andrea Clark from the Housing Authority this afternoon that it appears they will qualify. So with that, staff is looking for direction from the council on the option to purchase, and Andrea Clark from the Housing Authority is here should you have any further questions.
Very good. Any initial questions? And then I'll see if Ms. Clark can come up. No? I'm going to open the public comment. I mean, if there's, if Ms. Clark feels she needs to speak, but if not, we'll open the public comment and see where we are.
Good evening. The only comment that I wanted to let you know is I have reviewed the application of the prospective buyer. She does appear to be income eligible, and again, she meets your preference policy as currently living and working here in St. Helena. She's worked here for 6 years and lived here 2 years. So she's very interested in the purchase and has got herself pre-approved for a loan, and she's just ready to go, waiting for the council just make their decision. With regards to the current resale restriction agreement on the property, it does not require the seller to market the property within the preference policy. It just requires them to find a income eligible buyer. So the new agreement that the buyer would execute does then put all of the preference policies into that agreement, and does then make any future resale of the property have to go through the whole preference policy and marketing and lottery and everything else. So that will take place then at the sale of the property. I think that's all I had to add.
Very good. Are there any questions from the council?
I have one question. My recollection is that the same thing happened 1 year ago or 2 years ago. We had another home in Voorhees, and we waived our right at that point. And so did the same thing happen to that buyer who came in not because of our purchase right, but came in outside of it? They're subject to the continuing restriction about the preference?
Yes.
Policy? Okay.
Any new purchaser signs a whole new agreement, and that restrictiveness starts that clock starts all over again. So they don't take over the current owner's agreement. They execute a whole new agreement. And yes.
So at some point, we may not need to step or have any reason to step in at all, correct? I mean, as homes turn over, the preference policy comes in place for everybody.
Correct. Yes. Any time you've had a resale, yes, we've. I think that's gone back probably about 10 or 15 years ago. We, the city attorney, drafted new agreements to make sure that the preference policy was incorporated in the resale restriction agreement.
How many homes are affected? It's just that one circle?
Oh, it's just the circle and some of the townhomes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Marietta townhomes.
I'm just, may I ask a question, Mayor? I'm curious about the incentives and the discretion that the seller has. Seems to me that the price is pretty much set, right? So, could for example, not that I'm suggesting this, could a seller say, no, I don't want to deal with this eligible buyer? What if there's several eligible buyers? What happens?
Yeah.
Income eligible.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So in the past, we have encouraged the sellers that don't have the newer agreements to actually have like a marketing period and to have a then an application period, and then we've actually initiated the preference policy and done a lottery. And then one time when we had a resale, they went through all of that effort, and they only had one interested person. So it kind of varies. I think if they actually had a open marketing period, they'd probably have a lot of interest in the home. However, people get excited about the price, but then they don't understand all the restrictions that come with it. So I have spoken to this interested buyer, and she's very aware of the restrictions that come with the property.
That's a little cloudy and ambiguous for me, but I'll accept your answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not?
Well, I'm just wondering if the seller is obligated to sell to the first eligible prospective buyer that comes along, or could the buyer just say, I'm not going to sell to anyone, I'm just going to wait? And I mean, I'm just wondering how much discretion the seller has under the existing agreement. There may be newer agreements that prevail, but under this existing agreement, can they pick and choose who their buyer is the question?
Yes, sir. They can. They can
Okay.
pick whomever they want as long as they are first-time home buyer and they're income eligible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? No. Thank you also for the work you're doing. I mean, this is it's very helpful to our community, so it's appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'll bring it back for some discussion. Actually, I'm going to close. Seeing no additional public comment, I will close the public comment and bring it back for some discussion.
I would like to let this woman get this house and waive our option for it. I think it's great that she lives and works in our community. She's ready to go and wants to get it. To me, it makes sense that she should get it.
Any additional comment? I concur. Is there a motion?
We just needed to give direction.
Okay.
Discuss and provide direction. to
Okay,
staff.
very good. So
That we waive the option.
Yes.
Very good. So, Mr. Prestwich, you have the direction? Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and we will move on to our next item, 11.2. And this is consideration and approval of a resolution approving an application for a minimum of $200,000 through the Parks and Water Bond Act of 2018, Proposition 68, for per capita grant funds. And this is Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. While we try to keep our eyes on grants, sometimes the state of California contacts us and asks us if we're interested in one, and this happens to be one of those types of grants. And so this has recently come to our attention. It's a per capita grant, which translates to the fact that we are eligible for up to $200,000 minimum, maximum of $200,000. under the per capita provisions. There are other provisions that allow for additional applications. It does require a 20% or $40,000 match from the city, but that's money well spent when you can leverage that to receive $200,000. The staff's recommendation is that we meet with our Parks and Rec Commission to review some possible projects, and what we're zeroing in on in talking to the state and thinking about eligible projects would be aging playground equipment, and we've had conversations about some of that playground equipment and its deterioration over the past year or two. And to receive that feedback from them on December 16th, bring you back a recommendation for submittal at your January 14th meeting. The current grant deadline, submittal deadline, is January 31st, although that date seems to be potentially in flux. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any initial questions from council?
A couple years ago, there was an issue that came up where there was some limitations and restrictions because we got a grant for some area. I don't know what park it was. Could have been Lyman Park, state grant. And it said, hey, you got to use it and you can't do anything with it. And really restricted it. I guess you have to pay back if you change the use. So I think we need to really be careful about that issue. And so what's the thinking there is the question.
I've had a similar grant like that in the past. I believe it was federal money, and there were some expectations on the federal government from the federal government that we would not sell that property and change its purpose, which was use as a public park. In this case, this is 2018 Prop 68 funding. We will review the grant for those limitations. I did look at the application procedures. I don't recall seeing anything, but it's a long document, and I was looking for eligibility more than limitations, and so I think it'll be important for us to take a careful look at that.
But just following up on what Paul brought up, I was thinking of the same thing, because what came to us was a resolution to declare the entirety of Lyman Park restricted for public use forever. And then as we looked into it further, it was that we were to restrict the area described by the boundary map for the grant that funded the playground equipment, which was a much smaller area. However, nobody could ever find the map, but that was the language of the resolution. And I'm just wondering, since that equipment went in by grant in the first place, are there anything applicable to replacing it, or is it just become a more difficult thing than, say, just switching to Crane Park or something?
Are you referring to the playground equipment that we have today?
Yeah, that's in the back of the park. That was funded by some state
It would
grant.
surprise me that there would be some limitation on our ability to replace aging equipment that may create unsafe type conditions. And I don't know if we're actively looking at the copy of the grant procedures right now that we have, and if we've looked at whether there are any limitations that we can see in the document. The procedures. Okay. So the procedures we understand are in draft form, but we'll talk to the state. We'll make the phone call also, not just rely on the written word, to evaluate limitations and explore, I think, other funding that may have been provided to the city related to existing equipment that we have, to make sure that we're not creating any additional challenges for ourselves.
Any questions, comments?
I'll move approval that we adopt the recommended action.
Second.
And a roll call?
Just to clarify, Mayor, did you open public comment for this?
I will open public comment.
Nobody.
And seeing none, I will close public comment. I appreciate that. Close public comment, and we will have a roll call.
And Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we will move now back to our new business calendar.
Old business.
Old business calendar. Item 10.1, This is consideration and approval of a resolution confirming City Council action to make additional lump sum contributions annually to the CalPERS unfunded liability to emulate a 15-year amortization schedule. And this is our finance, Ms. Smiths.
Great, thank you. Just a little refresher on how this item came about to City Council tonight. Back in 2018, in order to understand the full effect of PERS on the city did contract with Bartel Associates to look at our current amortization schedule, and also provide various options to City Council that would be available. On August 14th, 2018, Doug Pryor from Bartel came and presented 6 different options. At that meeting, the City Council did show a preference to option number 3, which was to make additional lump sum contributions. And then again on August 13th, 2019, so just about a year later, Doug came and represented the idea. At that time, at the August 13th meeting this year, City Council expressed the desire to memorialize the decision via resolution to pay back, to make additional lump sum payments in a 15-year clip as opposed to a 30-year amortization schedule. And so that is the item that we're bringing back before Council tonight. Additionally, at that meeting, City Council did request some further analysis by Bartel for a 10-year amortization schedule. Once that data was provided back to the city, we did not realize how much the increase was actually going to be to go from a 15-year clip to a 30-year or to a 10-year clip. But it would, the additional lump sum payment would come to about $500,000 per year. So based on that information, we have brought to City Council tonight a resolution expressing Council's decision to pay back the PERS liabilities on a 15-year clip as opposed to the 30-year clip. Also provided in front of you tonight, there were very detailed documents in the back of the City Council report that gave the 7% discount rate and the 6.5% discount rate for all 3 of the different groups that we have represented at PERS, which is miscellaneous, public safety, and then our fire department. And so what we did tonight, and in front of you and on the back counter, it shows we have 2 different summaries that actually have the total dollar amounts. So for the 7% discounted rate, under the current amortization schedule, the city will be paying back a total of $23.4 million. Knocking that down to 15-year is $20.7 million, and then 10-year would knock it down to $17.6 million. So you can see the additional funds that the city would save over time paying it down in the clips. And then the second piece of paper with the coloration on it, what that does is you have your current amortization payment amount. Next to that, you have what your payment increase to a 15-year amortization is. So basically for 2021, we're paying a little over $1 million. Doing the 15-year amortization would increase it by about another $86,000 for a total payment of $1.1 million. And then if you do it to the 10-year clip, it would now increase it to $503,000. So it's taken up to $1.5 million a year as opposed to $1 million a year. So we try to provide a little more information to City Council for that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any initial council questions?
Thank you. It's very clear.
Very good. I'm going to open the public comment. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, bring it back to council. Is there any discussion, or shall we entertain a motion?
Just one question. One question. Do we have to do this in 5-year increments, or is there the potential to say 12 years or 13 years or 11 years or something different than the 15? I'm not suggesting, I'm just wondering if we're limited to the horizon.
We are not limited to the 5-year clip. We were just trying to find an easy number to work with in presenting, but we are definitely not limited to that.
No, understood. Okay.
And when will we make this payment if we were to approve this? When we make the additional payment?
We have already made the payment for 1920 as part of our annual budgeting cycle. So what we would do is when we in the budget development, we would be presenting the additional lump sum payment in the budget development, and it would be approved by council with the operations budget.
And is that a clip that occurs throughout the year, or is it a one-time, or how does it actually get collected?
It is a one-time. So what we do is
Really?
our normal, our one-time, or our regular lump sum payment is due at the beginning of the fiscal year. And what we do is we actually have to make a request to CalPERS. Even if we request it, there's nothing to say that they will approve our one-time clip. They did this year. We have no reason to believe that they won't, but it does still have to go through approval process. But we actually made both of the lump sum payments, I believe, in August or September of this year. It was August of this year we made the additional payment. So we do, right after the budget is adopted, we make the additional lump sum payments right after budget adoption.
So in terms of looking at our overall budget and how much money we have in reserves, it's the payment increase amount that would decrease the amount of reserves, correct? I mean, we're already, when you calculate for us what's left in the reserve, you've already taken out our one-time payment that's the current amortization payment.
That is correct, because when we present the budget to City Council, it's a balanced budget, and we usually don't use reserves, but if it's something that we did have to tap into reserves to be able to make that payment, that would be presented to Council during budget.
This is so great. The state is like, we want the money now. They take it immediately. That's a fascinating and interesting legacy issue, clearly. Hey, I'm still really comfortable with the 15-year. I think that's, the cost savings is significant. The savings is incrementally even better with the 10-year, but then we really get hammered, and there's no reason not to spread this out over a totally reasonable 15-year period, which is also within standards that, we're not an outlier by doing this at all.
Yeah, are you entertaining a motion?
Certainly.
Okay, I move approval for recommended action.
Ooh, second.
And is there a roll call?
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you. So we'll move on now to item 10.2. This is discussion and direction on possible fiscal year 2019-2020 budget add-back options, and this is Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, in approximately April of 2019, during our initial budget discussions, we introduced a new concept this year, an add-back list to potentially park or set aside a couple of different ideas that that the city was not able to fully fund at the time, pending what we didn't know at the time was one of our three major revenue sources. We don't know those numbers. It's an educated guess related to property tax, and so we postponed a couple of considerations until we could have data on the property tax and also take a look at the performance of the sales and hotel tax, the other two major revenues. Since that time, we've also received some one-time monies. So we've received some property tax revenue, just over $300,000 associated with the educational revenue augmentation funds. We've received, because of unfortunately some vacancies, we have saved some salary costs that accounts for about $120,000. We have had a short-term rental settlement that also has provided funding, and we do now anticipate additional one-time funding year-to-date of approximately $475,000. I am recommending use of up to 80% of that, so that's approximately $380,000. And we've outlined a variety of items that were from the original add-back list and also included a few additional items. They're noted with an asterisk on your staff report. So some add-back items are recommended for funding. Others are recommended for postponement at this time. And so just briefly to walk through the add-back items recommended for funding. We did have a police officer retire. This was a sergeant, and under the city's current memorandum of understanding agreement with the police officers association, the city allows for the conversion of sick leave time to retiree health benefits, calculated at an hourly rate. So the cost of that was $64,000. We did begin setting aside some funding in our budget each year over the last 2 years. This amount eclipses that amount. And so in an effort to move the needle closer to fully funding this obligation over time, while we're at the same time turning off the obligation as a long-term cost to the city, we're recommending we use some of these one-time funds to fully fund that particular employee's retiree medical costs of $64,000. We know from our conversations, and by the way, this we've also noted whether this aligns with the council goal, and in this case, it does align with council goal number 4, our stewardship of the city's finances in our effort to ensure long-term economic sustainability. We know. On a second item, we know from conversations and bidding associated with the library roof repair that to fully replace this roof, it's going to cost additional money. We don't know the exact dollar until we go to bid. I have attempted to create some flexibility here because I recognize that we're still talking about the building itself. And so while it says library roof repair phase 2, there's also a slash that says civic improvement. So the intent here is to set aside enough money for a subsequent roof repair or invest in civic improvements if there was a different decision related to that building down the road. And that number is $250,000. As you know, there's a regional climate initiative that the city is participating in. The group has had one meeting. There has been a conversation about potentially working together proportionately to fund a position to assist with that effort. And the city managers of the region have talked about using the LAFCO staffing model as an example. And so when we look at those numbers, we expect that a proportional regional funding for this initiative would consist of about $15,000 a year. So we're recommending use of that money today to fund that work that's just begun. And at the same time, we would intend to incorporate that type of funding into next year's budget to sustain that effort. And that's consistent with the general plan and also one of our work plan goals for 2019. We are also recommending use of $25,000 to advance the initial phase of a city branding effort. I don't know if all of you had a chance to see the email I sent you earlier today, but the Chamber of Commerce has, for the past 5 months, a contract in place related to marketing with a company called the Abbey Agency. And so one concept is to work with the Chamber and the Abbey Agency to advance work related to the initial organizational steps of a branding refresh. So this is the brand identity, the logo, a style guide, which is really fonts, colors, etc., and a branding board that builds on the work that we did with our economic study earlier in 2019, late 2018. And then once complete, there would be a second phase to this branding effort where additional work is related to development of a recruitment toolkit and associated implementation of an advertising campaign. We would build that. The intent would be to build those additional funds into next year's budget. And alternatively, this is something that can be done by the city as well. And this is consistent with Goal 4F on our work plan, as well as our downtown economic strategy, and was one of the items that we set aside earlier this year. And then finally, I am recommending that we invest approximately $30,000 into a management review of our development process. We know from the earlier Cosmont work, some of the comments related to our development process. The idea here that we talked about earlier this year is that with a new planning director coming on board soon, the idea would be to interview developers and customers that have been through our development process, whether it's a room addition, a bathroom remodel, a project, and talk to customers that have walked through our doors over the last 12 to 18 months, identify what's worked well and what could work better. use their technical expertise to identify additional recommendations to help create a more customer-friendly development process and identify gaps in our process. So I think this can be very helpful to an incoming planning director, and I think that whoever we bring on board to advance this work can work within a budget that we can identify. And there are a few items that are on the postponement list. Happy to talk about those in more detail if you have questions. But in essentially every case here, we're not ready to advance these. For example, the facade improvement program, a policy would need to predate the actual allocation of the funding. So we still have not done that, but I would anticipate that's something that we'll be able to start on in 2020.
Very good. Thank you. Are there initial questions from council? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. And any discussion on these items?
I have some comments.
Yes.
To me, the last two items on the list here are very much related. The development review process and the city branding. The Cosmont recommendation to us was that we try to get rid of our anti-business reputation and image through marketing and branding. And, we can say we're pro-business, but until we go fix these other things, it's maybe not entirely true advertising. But I think that's the initial focus of this so-called phase one of the branding. So I think the two of them have to go together. But my other concern is that this is phase one. It's going to be a more costly thing than $25,000 in the long run. And I feel personally that we should go through the RFP process for somebody who is going to work with us for the long term, and it may end up being this firm. I don't know. But I would hate to just start this phase one and then we have a huge contract amendment. And I was a little confused, actually, by what you sent today, because it talked a lot about destination marketing, which to me is not what our rebranding effort is about, and destination marketing is already going on by the Chamber and by Visit Napa Valley. So I'm not ready to jump in and just give phase one to this group. I would prefer to advertise and let them respond with others, with the idea that we would have a multi-phase project that is going to cost more in the long run, and tie it into this work for the last item that you have here, the review of the development process.
Thank you. Any comments?
Councilmember Koberstein, that is exactly right, because we can't fall back on sort of traditional ways to do things, and so it's sort of distressing to see that it's sort of a traditional way of doing something, right? That we'll do some sort of destination marketing and then we'll extend it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it seems like it's time for some fresh thinking.
Any other comment? I think Ms. Koberstein makes some excellent points. I want to first say that, I want to thank the Chamber for the work that they're doing. The work on Jingle All the Way, the dialogue with the city, I think we're getting to a really good place. We're moving forward, bringing in tonight, approving a new planning director, wanting to make sure that all our steps moving forward are consistent. And so I think some of the points Ms. Koberstein makes about sort of looking at this a little more maybe holistically makes sense. That's sort of where I am. Are there any other thoughts?
Well, just with the recent Jingle All the Way, the partnership was so great with the Chamber and doing that. And even though it was talked a lot about it's for people coming here to have the experience and help people come and stay in St. Helena, but it had this amazing local benefit. On Monday when we did the pop-up, it was like the kids, we knew every single person that was there. It was just incredible. And I could see people walking by the street and stopping because everybody was so happy. It just looked so fun and was so just such a beautiful experience with the lights, and you could get adult beverages, and there was s'mores and fire pits. It was just so beautifully done that I would love to continue doing those experiences and having that benefit. So when I look at $25,000 for moving forward, I don't want to lose that, and I don't want to lose that partnership because I see it really creating good stuff. And if there's a way for us to also move forward in doing some of the branding with them, and I don't know why we have to hold it off and wait and do it all on our own.
I think, to me, the branding is different than the partnership that we have on things like Jingle All the Way, and we've asked the Chamber to dedicate a certain amount of the funds that we give them towards local marketing. But to me, the rebranding is about how we do business, how we're functioning as a government, why we want you to move to St. Helena or consider moving your business here. And to me, it's a larger effort than $25,000. And so I think it deserves the RFP process that we would apply to contracts that we know are going to become bigger in scope. And I'm not sure we're ready to, I don't think that's going to delay things, because until we start working on this management review of development process, I think that's essential to the rebranding. And this entity can certainly apply, in my view.
I agree with that for the management review of development process. I want to understand more about what this project is, this city branding that's on here for the $25,000.
So can I know Mr. Doring had a point. Can I open the public comment on this to get a comment from the?
You already did.
I did on the, okay, sorry. Mr. Doring has a point that.
Well, I agree with what the comments have been so far, but I think we're conflating two different issues. On the one hand, we're talking about government and its reputation, and then on the other hand, we're talking about business and the marketplace. To me, they're entirely different. And so I think I agree that government processes, development processes, how we treat applicants, that should be separated, frankly, from that is an issue for sure. But I don't want to punish the business sector for the failure of government. We need to do both, but I think they're actually separate. I wouldn't use the word branding, frankly, when I talk about government. I don't see it as a branding issue. I see it as certainly improvement in our reputation and how we can do that and adjust application processes, zoning, all those different things go forward. But I really don't think it's appropriate for government to be micromanaging how the business community does its branding, which I see as separate and not same as government branding. The two are different in my mind. And so I'd like to keep them separate. This is my experience is based on what the Chamber of Commerce in Calistoga did. They went on a huge branding program. The city gave the money to the chamber. The chamber then hired a very, very good firm to do that work. It's totally different, frankly, than the reputational aspects of government. They're completely apples and oranges. And so I just would make those comments.
But if we're talking about the downtown study that this work item grew out of, it grew out of the Cosmont Company's recommendation that we resolve our anti-business reputation and rebrand through marketing and branding. And I think that does have something to do with government and how we process things and how long it takes to get through the process here. I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't understand what this $25,000 is going to do. If it's going to be marketing St. Helena business, that's fine. That's already what we have asked the chamber to do with some of the money that we give them. But I thought this was going to be more than marketing businesses.
So my understanding, Mr. Presswich, is that this is a phase one of a marketing project.
Let me give you a little bit of background on how we arrived at these numbers. So I backed into the 25. All of the other items essentially were in my mind, higher priorities for the city. And the remaining amount of funding was $25,000, which was, in my mind, the amount of money that we could afford at this time. And so, in partnership with the Chamber, we talked to the Abbey agency, who they are in contract with. I met with the owner of the company, and we talked about ways that we could start the work that's associated with branding, which is focused more on the business than the reputation of the city. So the intent here under the branding is to, and there are organizational steps to get a business or an agency or a destination organized for branding. And so if you had a chance to see the link to the Abbey agency, they've done work for North Lake Tahoe, they do work for Carmel, they've taken on projects in Goleta and Murrieta, similar cities with similar challenges in that they had vacancies, and they were working to try to address and encourage visitors to populate those businesses. But there's organizational steps that come into developing a branding campaign and refreshing a branding, which a business would do on a regular basis. And so the style guide, for example, this city, I know internally we don't have a style guide that governs the look and feel of how we communicate. And as a city, we don't have a style guide today. And we do have a brand that's perhaps a little dated now, that the Chamber uses. And the focus of the 25 is to get us organized with additional steps, which are outlined in the email and also in an attachment here that I emailed out to you today that does speak to the idea that there is a phase 2, which we would incorporate into next year's budget, and that would include the formal strategic marketing plan development, a recruitment toolkit, and the campaign development. There would be additional costs associated with any media or printing that comes with that, but there often are opportunities for sponsorship for some of that. The management review I think of as independent of the branding. I think there's a relationship, but I was thinking of it as an opportunity to bring in a person that has significant development experience that could talk to our customers, identify challenges or good feedback that they had, document that, analyze gaps in our process where certain adjustments can recalibrate the way we do business to change the reputation, and also take advantage of some of the changes that that the council's already said yes to. So we know that there are some policy changes that you made in 2018 that are bearing fruit today for us, and we want to talk to those customers about it. But I think there are also challenges that this type of effort will identify and provide a new director with a little bit, instead of having to learn that challenge herself, she will have a little bit of a roadmap to some of the fixes that might be recommended from a third party independent look at our development process. But I think there are things that the council's already said yes to. I think there are changes coming with the zoning code update. There will be lessons learned out of the management review, and all of that can enhance the branding that we focus on for the community. But I think there are two types of branding. One is related to what's happening with our development process and how we might recruit businesses. And then there's a second type of branding that focuses on St. Helena as a destination.
So in looking at, so this is an agency that the Chamber is already in contract with, so there would be, in a sense, a consistency in use. This is sort of building a base, doing some groundwork for future work, but it's with a company the Chamber's already working with. So there is consistency.
I mean, that's some of the thinking on my end is, knowing that we have a lot of projects on our hands, that working with a business organization is a way of extending the work that we do. The Abbey agency has a number of good clients, and I think the type of work that they do is it's consistent with what I was imagining when we talked about what we called at the time we called it downtown, the downtown economic strategy. I think that it would be fair to say that we're looking at something that is branding the entire city, where we're branding St. Helena, and I would expect that even if it's working through the chamber, that the city would have several seats at the table, so that we would partner with them on issues that were important to us.
I'm sorry, Mary had a question.
I have a simple question, maybe to get to the root of my issue. At what size of a contract do we need to go to an RFP, as opposed to just making a decision like this?
I think when you add up the numbers, the 25 and the 90 as sort of the development of the campaign, we're at 115, and then there would be additional investments in media buys and or printing.
And at what point do we can do this because this is within your authority. At what point do we have to issue an RFP? That's my sort of fundamental question. Because or are you suggesting we get around that by doing this in 2 fiscal years? To me, if we should normally be procuring these services through an RFP, that's the way I think we should go. And this may be the agency that we choose. But to start, if later we're going to have to move to an RFP or something, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I was trying to live within our means, and phase this over 2 fiscal years. So use some of the one-time monies now, and then incorporate additional funding into next year's budget in July.
And we can do that we can contract for 25 now and 90 or so later?
This would be, and the way I imagine it, I think there's 2 approaches here. One is we go at ourselves and we go through an RFP process. Another approach is we amend the contract with the chamber and add additional duties to their contract, and they have a pre-existing arrangement with Abbey Agency, and they are the organization that takes the lead on the branding effort.
So is the answer there isn't a dollar amount that triggers an RFP?
We can do an RFP at any amount of money. Even though this may be within the city manager's authority, I think because of the significance of the issue, it's appropriate, and I wanted you to know that this is part 1 of 2, and that's why the staff report includes a reference to additional similar funding would be needed in fiscal year 2021. Similar was a word that was developed before we had the updated information from the Abbey Agency. So I would say it's in the neighborhood of $115,000, 80 to 115 approximately.
I think what Mary is trying to get to is, at what point are we required, if at all, to do an RFP for a professional services consulting contract? That's basically what this is. It's not a construction, it's not public works, it's professional services. That's the question, as I understand it.
I can answer that
curious.
question.
Yep.
So, per our municipal code, professional services, the acquiring of professional services shall be procured through negotiated contract and may include the request for proposals and qualifications. So, it is not a requirement. The requirement is the city manager has authority to sign up to $25,000. Anything above $25,000 for PSA, professional services agreements, does come to city council, but there is not a requirement that you do have to go to RFP for these. It's at that point, it's up to the department head and to use their discretion.
Is there any other comment? For me, I feel as though this might give the chamber an opportunity, to work with somebody they're already working with to start building something forward. If when we get to the point that we're looking at phase 2 and we decide to go in a totally different direction, I can see the hiccup there. But I wonder, I'm just wondering for this amount of funding, if we are able to get some traction with a business, with a company that the chamber's already engaged with. And I feel like, we're having a good dialogue with the chamber. We're seeing some good things happening. And if there's a way to keep that momentum going, so I'm fairly comfortable with this, but if we feel there's going to be a hiccup, is there more comment on that?
I don't see the downside to issuing an RFP and understanding what the whole project is and how different firms would approach it and what they would charge us to do it, rather than starting here and then just saying, okay, now we need to amend another 50, now another 40, because here comes the next phase. That's my only point. It's not just a $25,000 project, it's a bigger project. And I think it's worthy of consideration. And as I said, this may be the firm that we award.
What I heard was one of the issues is staff time and ability to work on this and be able to address all of the firms coming through and make that choice. And part of the deal, what we're paying for right now and the cost saving, is getting to partner with the chamber to do this.
Mr. Knudsen?
And I have a corollary to that, is that part of the advantage of an RFP process is that you really lock down on the scope definition. We're sort of not doing that, right? It's sort of loosey-goosey, and we'll spend some money and we'll see what we get out of it. And that might be perfectly fine, but there is an advantage to having it locked down. Yeah.
If we did decide to do an RFP process, is that something that we could turn around quickly? I know we have 1,000 things to do.
Your next item is about to double the number of evening meetings for 3+ months, and I'm concerned about our ability to produce an RFP in the next 3 months that would give us adequate time to really work on this. But I think there may be value in bringing you back some additional information in January about 2 options. So one option would be the RFP route and what that might look like, and then secondly, a little more meat on the bone related to what working with the chamber might look like, so that we maybe lock down that scope of work a little bit more than what we have today. And then I think the feedback I'm receiving is the council's comfortable with the idea of some form of branding. The question is how we deliver that. And I think it may be helpful for us if we bring you back some additional information at the January 14th meeting. That would give us some time to work more closely with the chamber on the scope, and then look at perhaps some other cities that have put together scopes of work and give you some samples to look at.
Go ahead.
I think we should also consider that we sort of have a branding effort underway with our streetscape. I mean, we will be making some kind of statement about which way we go with that. And, I would hope things would be in sync. And so if we go this route, I think they should be aware of what's coming out from the Gates firm and what the city ultimately chooses, so that we're not going in different directions.
I think the other thing is sort of this logo, messaging. What are we trying to communicate to the world? Who exactly are we trying to communicate it to? I mean, is it about the fact that we've got streamlined processes at City Hall? That doesn't seem very compelling to me. And is it about that we're open for business? Well, that also doesn't quite seem right. I mean, this is a unique and incredibly interesting and cool urban community. I'm sorry, rural, not urban community. It's a rural community, but with neighborhoods, and we've got there's some unique positioning there that I think may not be addressed so far. So I'm left sort of muddled by the purpose.
So if we concur on the other items, and that this might come back on the 14th with some additional information.
I want to make sure I check in on all of the other items and make sure you feel comfortable with these, because they have different implementing activities. So we would need to, in at least one of the cases here, I think, amend our budget. and there may be additional process that comes with implementing those. So I want to make sure we're clear on the 64,000, the 250, the 15, and the 30, which I would.
Yes, look great.
And I'm looking for at least 3 heads to nod yes,
Yes.
sir.
And then the facade program that was an additional, that's something that could be brought up a little bit later, maybe when the new planning director is in place.
Right. There's the biggest issue out the gate will be the zoning code update, which we're actually kicking off on the 12th, Thursday, and getting a head start on that. This isn't too difficult to put together. It's just a policy, but we would want to run that through the Planning Commission for some feedback before we bring that to the council. And I think for the management review, I would be interested in getting some bids from different companies that would have an individual available to assist us with this. And we would bring you a contract probably in January to move that forward.
Can you tell me what the asterisks mean under some of these?
So if there's an asterisk, it wasn't an idea that was identified in April. So it was added by the city manager because he saw an opportunity to address some retiree medical needs with some one-time money.
I got it.
Et cetera.
I was looking for a footnote. And I must have missed
Is it missing? Maybe it's. I think it's described in the narrative.
So do you have what you need at this point? If you have the
Yes, and we will bring you back a different report in January related to the branding.
Very good.
Okay.
Great.
I just want to make 2 comments before we go off this subject. One, it always is disturbing to me that we deal with these sort of budgeting items before the budget. And I know that these is different because these are issues, quote, add backs. But we're making policy decisions prior to actually prioritizing other things. And I would remind the council that we have a goal 5, support thriving families, enhance the safety, well-being, and healthy development of our youth. One of those to-dos is needs assessment of the community youth issues and challenges. We have just one example of something that's important to me, but there are many others. So we're sort of pick and choosing at this point early on in the process. And by history, by all the 20 years I've been on local government, we will start seeing more of these as we get closer to the budget. It's sort of a tradition. We got to start doing this before the budget and before the goal setting. So I would encourage staff not to do that and to have a bigger picture item that's related to our next budget. Even if this money's rolled over to the next budget, it would be better than to do the piecemeal approach. And then the second thing is I would really strongly encourage the chamber to have a voice in front of the city council and not, I know there's dialogue offline, which is important, but it has to be online too, so we get a better feel for what's going on there. That's a missing piece, and I said that a couple times before, and it would be important and enhance our partnership if we can have the ongoing communication, because we have to answer to other people who are asking questions. What is the chamber doing? How are they a partner? And so I said my piece.
Just briefly on the items, this is a continuation of the prior prioritization. With the only exception is that about 3/4 of the funding in this one time is recommended for, and these are numbers that I added, but invested in paying down debt and setting aside money for capital improvements. The only new items are the 15,000 for the climate action and the climate initiative, and actually I think the management review was previously identified as well. So I think the only new item other than paying down the debt and setting aside additional capital funding is for the climate initiative.
Did we have a budget for the needs assessment? Because it's supposed to be due June 30th, 2019.
We did allocate $20,000, I believe.
Yeah.
For the youth goal 5. So we incorporated $20,000 into the budget. And as you know, this is something that we postponed until we had these.
To sprinkle it around to a number of little issues.
It's also hard for me to personally, as in my role here, be excited about the pitched section of the roof repair, we did a careful assessment to minimize costs, right, in order doing the flat section. So then sort of prioritizing the steep section again, well, we don't know. The flat section repair might actually address some of the issues. And $250,000 is a lot of money. So I wouldn't want to get that sort of in the front of the queue at all without a lot of other discussion.
But I have a different idea on that. Just with all of the rain, we want to be ready to go if the library needs it. It's so important to have a roof that works and isn't destroying that building. That I liked seeing it on here.
And I think the way it's written is that there's the ability to pivot off of that if it's determined that that's not needed, and we know there will be a need for that money in some civic structure.
Well, we've just had a lot of rain. I mean, what's happening in the library?
Well, just going back to the library roof for a minute, the council, one of the goals this year was, and the entire $380,000 that you invested in capital improvements, which was an increase of $280,000 over the prior year, was expected to fully fund the library roof replacement. And when we went to bid, the numbers came in the $800,000 range. So we're short. And this is an effort in the current year to replace that roof, and the rest of the roof does need replacement. If you've looked carefully at that roof, it's a mess, and it's 40 years old, and it's in need of replacement. If we're not going to replace the building, we should invest in that roof when the rain stops, which means current year, fiscal year. And so this is an effort to shore up the budget for the current fiscal year.
Okay.
I think it's prudent.
So have we gone through the issues so you got
yes.
the direction you need? Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
We got 5 different opinions at least.
Okay, we're going to move on now to
10.3.
10.3, consideration of a resolution establishing the Financing Civic Institutions Task Force to review and analyze the financing options for the possible construction of new or remodeled civic institutions in St. Helena, as well as other infrastructure such as storm drains and downtown streetscape, and provide recommendations to the City Council, discussion and direction regarding draft civic institutions evaluation criteria / principles, and 3, next steps related to review of November 12th, 2019 Knoll and Tam presentation, and this is Mr. Presswich.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a continuation and a refinement of prior conversations you've had, most recently on November 26th. And we've brought you back an updated resolution, and in the discussion section of the staff report, as well as in the attached resolution, we have responsibilities of the task force, which we're referring to as a Financing Civic Institutions Task Force, itemized, and we'll want to take a careful look at that list to be sure that it accurately reflects your interests. I've challenged myself and our team to put our February 2020 hats on and anticipate what type of language would we wish we had clarified today. And so we've tried to do that. I think it's clear, but this is the purpose of this meeting, is to make sure that it accurately reflects your expectations and that we've captured those changes in a way that will be understandable for the task force. So we have 3 tasks for you today. One is this resolution. And then secondly, while it's not important that we finish it today, it is important because it's an element of the work plan for the task force. The idea that the council would adopt or endorse a civic institutions evaluation criteria. And this is a request from the council. So we started with I believe, one of the November meetings, the direction was provided to the staff, I think, on November 4th to bring back draft criteria. I borrowed heavily from the shape synthesis and incorporated a few other comments that the council made, and that's attached for review today. If you're comfortable with that, we can move forward with it. Otherwise, it can also be something we bring back in January if you'd like more time with the criteria. And then finally, there were comments and direction to have a council conversation about what you saw on November 12th when Nolan Tam presented information about cost estimates and massing. And so in talking to Nolan Tam, they are holding time on January 8th and January 9th. That's a Wednesday and a Thursday, I believe, where we could schedule a workshop to create that environment for you to ask questions and talk about what you liked and what you might change. And that may be valuable to have that conversation in advance of the task force so they can look back on that same conversation and understand some of your thinking. So I'll pause there.
Are there initial questions from council?
I do have a question. On page 3, under discussion, item A. Are you there? Okay. I'm having a difficult time understanding what this means. In particular, the last phrase there, it says, an adoption of a civic infrastructure strategy to action ideas and observations of the SHAPE Committee final report and associated research data. I really don't understand what that means.
So this is language that I believe is essentially verbatim from the September 17th report that we had prepared. So at that time, when the council met to talk about how to advance work of the SHAPE Committee, there was a staff report that included an outline of a civic infrastructure strategy. The council adopted that strategy, which consisted of the 4 phases. You see that recited in a lot of the staff reports to provide some history on the infrastructure strategy. And to action ideas really is a reference to moving the ideas forward, and the observations of the SHAPE Committee final report and associated research data, I think, is simply a reference to the work that was done. And I believe I used the same term in this report that we used in the September 17th report. So it probably reads exactly like the staff report from September 17th, 2018.
Okay. I think it's not clear, and I think we need to make it clearer. I think your explanation is clear for sure.
So I think the way to make it clearer would be to stop after it would stop after the word City Council report, review the September 17, 2018 City Council report, and let the report speak for itself.
So the report is the 4 steps?
The report is the staff report that the council adopted that strategy. It outlined a civic infrastructure strategy, and the council adopted that strategy that night, which has guided all of the work that we're doing.
I don't know why we're not just giving them the roadmap or whatever we call it. And it seems to me that this meeting or around this time was the joint meeting with the SHAPE Committee, when the council already decided to prioritize dealing with the city hall and the library and the recreation issue. So I'm not sure what they're reviewing. It would seem to me it would just be information that they're getting as part of the background.
It is the roadmap that the council has adopted that describes all the work that we're doing, and it does. And I think importantly, it includes this focus on the limited number of the assets to focus on now, so that we didn't try to take on all 9 buildings, for example, all at once. So it's just good history. If you think it's better to leave this out of the reso, we can do that and simply make the document available to the task force members.
I think that would be great. Sorry.
Just strike A.
Yeah, I think it's that comma after number that really threw me off. I was like, what is this other separate thing that they were supposed to be doing? I thought, as I understood it, as I read it, I go, this task force is going to create a civic infrastructure strategy, and they're going to turn those into action items. And I was like, oh no, I thought we already did that. So that was my confusion. Okay. But you've clarified it. I do think we should just be, period, use a period somewhere earlier. So, sorry.
Mr. Knudsen, do you have a...
Yeah, this is, I think the title is exactly right, and I think that's what we're intending. We're talking about financing civic institutions. So we're not talking about financing the city. We're not talking about financing the city infrastructure. We're not talking about financing the city assets. We're talking about financing civic institutions. And so I actually do not understand why we're including the storm drains in this. That's a city asset. It's not a city institution. I don't think we're going to be putting, it's a different, it's very important. It's totally part of our issue, but do we want them to look at roads and our financing strategy around the wastewater treatment plant and the water and our roads and Measure T funds? And that's what's, Measure T can pay for storm drains as well. That doesn't make sense to me. This is really about our civic institutions. The institutions are the library, the city hall, a potential recreation area, and we've got an incredibly large potential bill from Nolan Tam, and that's what we're trying to figure out. Why are we messing around with everything else? I mean, we need sidewalks. We're going to do a downtown streetscape. I mean, is this about the institutions, or is it about the entire city financing? They're very different.
This is your direction. So
that's why I think it's too broad.
Is council direction.
That's my belief.
Okay, so yes.
I think it's right on. If we go back to months ago when we had a sources and the uses, and we were trying to figure out everything we were going to have to pay for, and where the money was coming from, and we know that there is going to be a shortfall in the streetscape, and we have other issues that we know we need to address in the near term, and I definitely think they should be looking at that. I think it's very difficult for them to say, oh, we might need money for the Signorelli barn in the future, and go way off in that direction, because we don't even have any cost estimates for those. But
is there a way to sort of hybridize that by saying, we have this look, we want to look at these the City Hall, Library, Rec Department as our main focus, keeping an eye on what these other costs may be and where those revenue sources may be, so we don't get, as I think maybe Mr. Knudsen's concerned, the main focus lost within the larger picture. I think in my mind we want to keep this main focus of the City Hall, the library, possible rec center at the forefront, but do consider, because it is a context that those exist in, but consider the context as well.
Well, the context is our other assets. So does that include the wastewater treatment plant, the water plant, our roadways? I mean, where are we drawing the line? I mean, maybe we need to open it up to that, but or the flood control project, which we're responsible for maintaining. But it strikes me that our focus is on our institutions. That's what the community is driving us towards, is let's do something about our institutions. And yeah, that's the context. The context is all the assets and our underfunded over the years, our stormwater system, our underfunded roads, our upgrades that we need at places like the Cronulla pump station. But, aren't we motoring towards a decision on our institutions, not on our general assets? I mean, we can open it up. Sure. It's a different discussion, though.
Actually, this is the first time I think I've seen institutions sort of creep into the description. As far as water and wastewater, those are totally segregated funds that we have to deal with through the rate process, and maybe a patch to do something about the Cronulla pump station. But what we're talking about is everything else that we have to pay for that doesn't have dedicated funding. And I agree that they should not have the entire SHAPE list, but they should probably understand when they're looking at the long-range financial forecasts how much money we have to pay every year to keep those things from getting into worse condition. I mean, I agree they should focus on City Hall and library, and I mean, that's a lot of money right there. But I think you absolutely have to look at the streetscape, or we have to make decisions about that project. And it should definitely be part of it.
Yeah, I agree. The streetscape has to be in there for sure, because it's what we're trying to figure out. What can we afford? That's the question I want answered for myself is what do we want and then what can we afford?
So is this instead it's capital improvements, not civic institutions? I mean, that's we can call it that if that's what this is. Let's be. I mean, one of the criticisms that we've come under fire is that we tend to sort of mislabel what we're doing, and that leads to confusion and mistrust. And so if this is about civic assets, then let's call it what it is. And that's fine. It's a different discussion. It's a bigger discussion, but great. Let's include them. You know, I mean, I think they're totally important for context, but I think to me, I know I'm just one. You know, our core issue is like, how are we going to pay for these things if, in fact, they're a thing? The other thing is I'm not available that week, the first week of January, so I could not come if there was an 8th or 9th meeting.
To me, there's a time window element here, too, that wanting to keep this discussion somewhat in the rails, so time-wise, so that we can make a decision about City Hall, Library, Rec Center sooner rather than later. So wanting to keep the conversation somewhat confined. To me, if there's a way to keep the focus on those main elements and also looking at a bit of the context, but not opening this up for a conversation that's going to last longer than we want it to last. You know, so we can get to a decision-making area sooner rather than later. Mr. Doring?
I think the title is probably not the best title, but I think the words and in the resolution help guide us. You know, it's just providing context. The words here are review preliminary downtown street cost estimate. They're reviewing it. They're going to consider it in the whole as we focus in on these institutions or buildings. I think that's appropriate to have the big picture so that they can figure out, okay, what, you know, we decide to put a tax burden on folks and we have to have some context there, right? So review preliminary underground utilities master plan. They're not going to do much more than to consider it in their overall recommendation. So I feel comfortable with if we flesh it out in the resolution. I think there's enough language in there. Institutions probably is that's a difficult word, but I can live with it. I'm a person of words, and
you can change that word to infrastructure if you want.
Improvements or whatever. That's fine. We want to make it clearer I'm more concerned about the task force that they have the direction that they need. And so it's an important point.
Right. And so what's the direction? Is the direction to consider these institutional assets within the context of the other needs that our lovely city has to do from a capital perspective, or is it to look at all of those needs? I had thought, maybe I misunderstood that we were focused on this. Yes, the context is important, but we're focused on the big buildings that we're talking about, the library, the city hall, and potentially rec. But, I'm happy to have context. I'm not happy if it's like, well, we focused on the sewage and not the sewage. We focused on the storm drains and we focused on our roadways. Well, roadways measure T, but so is storm drains. All the other buildings that we've got. Let's focus on the important ones, and the rest is context. Is my hope.
Okay, so let's see where. In terms of what. Go ahead, Mr. President.
I'm particularly interested in making sure the council feels comfortable with letter H in the reso. This is the meat and potatoes of the report you're receiving.
This is okay. H provided here.
Well, I'll go back to one of my favorite financing methods that I hope they look at, which is a public-private partnership. If you think that's encompassed within that, I don't think we're looking at the general fund and its ability to do a lot of things, and we're also looking at other ways to raise money. I don't know.
I think that'd be
I think
that'd
what
be
we're asking
fantastic.
them to do is look at the costs that we have been presented with, and what are the various strategies to achieve these buildings or not, and in what time frame.
Is there? I need to. Is the language within here? Do we have the? In pointing to the Nolan Tam cost estimates and options, the streetscape cost estimates, review preliminary underground utilities master plan, work with the city staff to look at the long-range financial forecast, talking about police department needs. I mean, do we need a little bit of language focusing on City Hall, library, rec? If we're looking at this broadly in here, is there language in here that would keep a task force mainly focused on those items?
I think it would be revised A, the function, the issue that Paul raised first. I think in A, they get the information that this is what we decided to prioritize. And these are the 4 steps that we're going through to do it. It should be absolutely clear that that's what we want them to look at.
That's a priority within this other larger context. These buildings. These,
yeah, but
these private buildings.
we have a grant for the streetscape improvement, and we need to begin the work in a relatively short time period, and we need to know how much are we going to do.
I concur.
And there's a cost.
Yeah, I concur. I just don't want within all this for the task force to look at any in all civic buildings equally. I think we want them to look at the ones that we prioritize first.
I think the other thing is that we can't take Nolan Tam as gospel. Nolan Tam is an input. It's not the input in terms of this, and that's why I was hoping that we'd have architects and project managers and construction specialists, aside from finance people, to sort of look at the program.
Yeah, in all fairness to Nolan Tam, I don't think they were preaching the gospel, but I think it is important information. But I agree with you.
I mean, they're great. They did a great job for us, but this is a different.
Back to the question of the city manager, I'm comfortable with all of H. In fact, that is the most important reason to have this task force, H, and everything under it.
What does approach to architectural design mean in H? The style, or how we're going to work through that process?
I think that's a great question. I think when we look at that, I can see a couple of things. I can see a question related to are you designing for a building that can be easily maintained? Are we designing for an architectural marvel? Are we considering a design competition or an RFP or continuation of work with Nolan Tam? I think there's a variety of questions there, and then maybe that's too open-ended.
Also, LEED certification, for example. I mean, that's another part of it. You can make material decisions that, it all depends on.
I think those examples are all good. I would just add a couple of those in parentheses so folks kind of go, oh, I get what you're talking about there.
I just don't like asking a committee to weigh in on design issues. I feel like that's where good ideas get off track really easy. You've got to just have one vision and go for it.
Well, that's why the word approach is different than actually designing the building. How do you go about designing it? And there are many ways, as Mark said.
This is a little bit different than what I took from our conversation last time. I thought with respect to architecture, they were going to look at things, if we have architects on this group, that they were going to look at numbers like the Nolan Tam numbers and say, yes, those are reasonable, and say, yes, this is a reasonable amount if you want the extra LEED certification, or no, it's not, or you don't need to do that unless you want to achieve X, Y, and Z. I didn't think they were going to do much more related to architecture than that.
I think it's setting the groundwork for another phase. It would be a design phase.
But there are considerations. For example, like if you go to some of the new city halls that's been built, like Healdsburg and others, the question is, are you making a statement about the materials, not just the design, but are you making a statement about the materials and sort of the look and feel, and how much do you want to invest in that versus actually a very functional approach? And they're very different, right? So
They are, and they're related to cost.
Well, I guess we can ask Nolan Tam, what is the underlying assumption of our cost numbers? Is it, your basic building, or is it something more over the top? I mean, I think it's probably pretty generic at this point.
So I would invest. So, I'm not going to be on the committee, fortunately. They're going to be great. But if it were my choice, I would choose for a more basic functional building, but a one that looks really great and is something that the town can be proud of, right? So you don't invest in the interior walls, you invest in the exterior, and you make the interior more functional. But guess what? The architects and the people on this committee will have their own ideas about what kind of trade-offs we'll choose. And I bet they come up with some interesting ideas.
I'm done.
I think one of the things here is we're also supposed to look at the criteria, and we had criteria about buildings and site selection, and they were some of the shape criteria, like sustainable buildings, institutions or buildings we can feel proud of, nice places for people to work.
And so having that included so the task force gets that direction as well, so it's stated.
Yeah. Which,
I mean, for example, my concern about the Nolan Tam work, they made some assumptions, but they made assumptions about average space per worker, which I'd like those to be looked at, because I think we're in a more modern era where people don't have as much elbow room to do their functions. But those are things that the committee can flush out.
So, and are you suggesting they're going to go back and review the size of these buildings?
Oh, absolutely, because I think that's a key aspect of the cost. And if we say the building is definitely 13,000 square foot, well, maybe it doesn't need to be. So, and there's no reason. I mean, just like I said 5 minutes ago, Nolan Tam isn't gospel; it's an input. So, if we were saying that we have to follow the exact program that Nolan Tam's come up with, I wouldn't be excited about that. But hey, it's a great input, and they've put a marker down, and so now we can fine tune that marker's what I hope happens.
I don't think that's appropriate for this stage of the work. I think that the numbers are so huge, frankly. If you're talking about just the city hall plus the multi-function space, and then you add in the soft costs and whatever, you're in at $25 to $30 million, and you haven't even talked about the library. And so I think naturally it's going to be a stretch to figure out how to pay for this and over what period of time. And there will come a point where we have to get the pencil out and figure out how we might be able to achieve some cost savings. But I think we have to work with what we have from them and the cost numbers and the building sizes. And this is why I think it's really important that we do have this discussion before this committee meets, because I think we all probably have reactions to what we saw that night, and we haven't really expressed them. And I think we should, get that out.
And this is the plan on January 8th, right, is to have this discussion.
I've floated 2 dates that they're available, and we're holding time on their calendar. And what we would need to do is check your calendars. And if Councilmember Knudson's not available in person, perhaps you're available by telephone. Okay. It's the 8th of January or the 9th, and I can look for alternate dates as well.
But I agree with you that it needs to be talked about it before, and I think that's if we can get an opportunity, that's where we can do it. Mr. Doring, do you have a...
I was off on something else. Just from a stylistic point of view, I don't know if we have to bring this back or you have enough information, but I was going to suggest if you did bring it back, it would be really stronger and really more direct to have the item number 1 in the resolution say creation and purpose and function of the task force, and then bring up all that function stuff under item 1, have those all together. They're sort of disconnected, and I think people really need to know what the function is, and just bring it up into item 1, and then all the rest is really kind of not as important. It just, I think stylistically, all three of those kind of go together. Their purpose and function are kind of in ways the same. Just it doesn't make any huge difference, but it would be important to do that.
Just for clarification, everything under item 9, as it is right now, would move up to item 1, right? Okay.
Merge the two together.
We could adopt the resolution tonight with some process that allows for some additional editing, but I would like to walk through a few things I've heard that I think may clarify items related to the work plan. The other advantage of adopting the resolution tonight is it formally establishes the task force, so we can initiate the recruitment formally. I mean, we can start the recruitment without it, but helps to have that clarity. So what I've taken notes on is under A, we would strike the remainder of the sentence that occurs after the reference to the September 17th, 2018 City Council report. But I might suggest that we add a reference to say something to the effect of which prioritizes work on City Hall, library, and conceptual community parks and rec facilities or space.
I don't want to muddy the waters here, but I think you're probably going to give them a lot more than that, in terms of documents that they start with, like the SHAPE committee had. So they're going to review the background material. I mean, it's more than this meeting.
But they're trying to, I think what Mark is trying to get to is what's the purpose of reviewing that? It's
so
related to
grounded
focus.
in where we are.
Well, I don't want to argue. I'm just saying I think it's better language to let them know, why am I reading this?
Mm-hmm.
What's this got to do with anything? I think it's good.
It's
language.
a nice summary of everything that came out of the SHAPE committee and your subsequent prioritization of work and the rationale associated with it, along with a process of steps to construction. And we're between 2 and 3 right now in that 4-step process. We're inching ourselves toward step 3.
It's a summary. It's nice to have the focus be narrow instead of all of this information.
Okay. I'm real curious what's in this report. I need to go back and look at it. But because I'll tell you one thing, there is sort of this, the observations of the SHAPE committee final report, there is this sort of myth floating around that what the SHAPE committee did was not what they did. I mean, what they were asked to do was vote to advance options to the city council. And there was even I went back and looked at the tape, because it was not that they preferred one option over the other, which is sort of the narrative that is out there, that their choice was to do one thing. And I think that before they even voted, the question was put to them, what are we voting on? Are we voting on our opinion of whether this is a good idea, or are we voting on whether this should go to the city council? And it was straightened out for them that they were voting on, we think this option should go to the city council. And the narrative that is coming back is, their opinion was, this is what you should do. And that, was not it. And what they did, a majority of them voted to send 3 options to the city council, which to me was a good thing and reflective of the fact that they were a very diverse group. And we didn't want to limit it to just one option. So I hope this new committee gets that message.
So I have a couple of other suggested edits, and the city attorney was recommending that perhaps we stop at a different spot in that A. If we were clarifying A, it would read, which led to the prioritization of city building asset investments in order to limit the number of concurrent projects to a manageable number, and stop at that point. The report does speak for itself. And it was focused on the Phase 2 City Council asset prioritization and analysis. Then under H, under the first bullet point, and this speaks to Councilmember Koberstein's reference to the financing vehicle, perhaps we could, I don't think the current language addresses what you raised as an issue. So one option would be evaluation of the city's financial capacity, comma, financing vehicles or financing options, comma, and revenue producing potential and options.
Yeah, I think that would be
okay.
good.
And I think somehow at the beginning of H, we need to probably reference the fact that we're talking about the library, city hall, and conceptual community rec space.
Yeah, to summarize.
You're asking for a narrative report, but we're not explaining for which assets. And do you want to include the reference to storm drain and downtown streetscape, both of which will become general fund obligations because we don't have a dedicated sustainable revenue source for them?
So storm drains, am I unclear? For some reason I thought Measure T.
It's not essentially like for like. We just can't pick a storm drain and use Measure T, as I understand it. And it's your Measure T. Our streets are in such a condition. We will not be able to upgrade our storm drain system and repair all of our streets at the same time. Is another way of saying that.
So some reference here to not just the prioritization of the buildings, but saying streetscape and storm drains included in this narrative.
So you're saying those are general fund obligation. They're going to come up for general fund obligation in the near future when we're doing all this other work.
Absent any new grants that we find, these are going to become city general fund obligations.
Then yes, I want them in there.
I just have one comment on that, and I might have shared this with you, and I know our city attorney can look into this, but I thought I saw some change in the California statutes where storm sewers are now classified as sewers and can be funded through the enterprise fund. And so it's not like we're going to be doing that immediately because that's not the way our rates were set up, but I think we have the ability to look to putting a lot of storm drain work into the next water and sewer rates if you're looking for a dedicated funding source.
Right.
And as far as the streetscape, I mean, I'm sort of anticipating.
I'm not going to run on that one.
Well, you got to pay for it one way or another. I mean, maybe you just, I don't know.
So on the streetscape, you had a comment?
Well, I mean, is the long-range financial forecast going to sort of build in when? I mean, how is this money or how is this information going to get to them? Are you going to give them a long-range financial forecast that's going to say, we've been repairing storm drains at a clip of about $500,000 a year, and we're just going to assume that we need to keep doing that till we find another? And if we go with the streetscape program, it's going to take this much out of the general fund. If we go,
we're going to need to layer on a number of assumptions related to revenue and expenditures. Okay. But I think it's fair to say we are betting the house right now on our storm drains and keeping our fingers crossed that we're not going to have another catastrophic failure.
So if that's included and the task force knows that is part of it, then the breakdown. I mean, I don't think we have to start the breakdown of it tonight. We can just say that's part of their mission.
So, what I'm trying to do is capture exact language so that you can adopt a resolution that accurately describes the work. So, under the second sub-bullet point, under the second bullet point, so prioritization of improvements, Another place to add this reference to buildings or assets would be to refer to prioritization of improvements associated with City Hall, library, and park conceptual, community parks and rec space, and then potentially storm drains in downtown streetscape.
That sounds to me like it's pretty inclusive of the priority issues.
Okay.
We're approaching 9 o'clock. I was going to make a motion to extend.
And then finally, on the approach to
So we have to extend at 9. Sorry, do we do that now?
But by the way, what we're doing. Okay, sorry.
We have a motion to extend, and I'll second.
For how long?
15 minutes.
Okay.
I'll second. So, and we have our roll call.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuteau?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
And then,
So, sorry. Do you mind if I make a sort of a observation? We just made an assumption that our roadways are in worse shape than our storm drains, and that the roadway plan that we have in place, which is this 5-year plan, is actually the way that we've used Measure T funds. Whether it might be, in fact, that we should reverse it, and that like I have a low traffic street, nobody's on my street, and yet it's scheduled to be resurfaced in 2 years. Pine Street off of Allen doesn't need to be resurfaced. So if we're including the storm drain, and I think we should understand what's going on there, that it's really in context of our other physical infrastructure around town. And, what is our commitment there? I think our commitment is for the health and safety and welfare of our citizens, and that includes streets that they will not fall on when they walk and when they drive, and that it's well marked, and that our storm drains are taking the excess water from our rains and depositing them in the places they're supposed to be deposited. But if we're only looking at one side of the equation, we've got the roads taken care of because it's Measure T, but it's...
Well, if there's a gap, I think the task force looking at that will suss out what I think where you're going. I don't think we're going to solve it right here.
But we're taking certain things off the table when we're saying, we can't touch that because that's important, but we need to touch this. But that's all part of it. So since we've opened this up to a wider discussion that I was hoping for, which is fine, that's great, but it just means that we have to look at it within context, because we can't make assumptions about our priorities that are in case. If we find that we need to shift all resources to storm drains because they're going to fail and it's $50 million, then we should stop paving roads and fix our storm drains. That's just the facts, right?
Which is exactly why we're investing in a utilities underground master plan to guide the investments with Measure T. And on the street improvements, the science tells us that if we invest in the streets that are higher quality today, that's the better way of stretching the public dollar longer term. What we ought to do is set aside the streets that are already crummy and undrivable, and those would be the last ones that we repair. But we know that we have a couple of those streets that are important arterials that are included early in our program for other considerations. But the best way we can stretch that public dollar is to set aside those streets to the end of the Measure T period of time until we've brought all the other streets up to a higher pavement index. I have
go ahead.
Some comments on the final bullet point on the approach to architectural design. You suggested some brackets on that to give some examples, and so I have, it's sort of duplicated in the criteria, because if you include in the criteria pursue environmentally superior solution with low impact on water demands, that covers some of this, but I have consideration of environmental elements, materials, maintenance considerations, design, and I have a reference to process too, which essentially references, do you want to go out to bid with the current I mean, do you want to amend the current contract? Do you want to open up a new RFP? Do you want to consider a design competition? That's the process that I'm referring to.
Should it mention approach to architectural design / process? Just so that word process gets in there and clarifies that a little bit.
And I can communicate to the task force what this conversation, what the elements of those examples were.
I think it's way too broad. I think that they have a lot to do to get through the financing, and what I want them, my preference would be to look at the Nolan-TAM numbers, and if they think there is something wrong with the assumptions that went into them, raise them and adjust the numbers or tell us what the spread is. But to get into the next step of what's the competition going to be or whatever, I mean, those are decisions for later. I don't see how they're going to be finished in the time frame we want them to be.
If the architectural design informs the cost, I think having some dialogue about it. But if we put the bookends on the timeline for when we're getting this report back, I think that'll sort of self-regulate in terms of how much discussion they can have on that. Because we're creating the bookend. We want the report by this time, and we have the other things that are priority. It just may inform the conversation a little bit. I agree that we don't want them to go into the weeds on it.
Not at all. And I also just want to, have them understand the amount of money we've invested in Nolan-TAM, and we've researched all of these other firms, and they're a great firm that have had a lot of great other projects. And part of what we're paying for is their expert opinion, which I really value. And so I'm thinking, if there's something that somebody raises that's a concern, that can come up, but I don't want them to go through and nitpick their work, personally.
How do you feel, Mr. Presswich, in terms of what you've got from us at this point?
You have another edit with a function that we would incorporate into the reso. Maybe just it's moving language. And I think those are the only changes.
What about the item G? I thought we had a brief discussion about the police the last time, and the concept was that they were going to be advised that at some point in the future there was going to be an expense of perhaps this much for a police facility, and that they should just factor that in. I don't really know what else we want them to get into.
I think because we're talking about replacing a building that includes the police facility, I think there may be considerations that it either fits into another concept, or because I'm assuming that this group is going to look at different variations of how we construct. And I think in a couple of different options, there is room for the police department to be built into the building. We're looking at probably 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. And
into the City Hall building?
Into whatever building. So because we haven't made a site selection decision for City Hall, there are options that we can put 4,000 or 5,000 square feet in a number of different buildings. Either it's remnant square footage in a building such as the library, if that's converted to a City Hall, or it's a building that is augmented in the current spot, or it's a new building somewhere different. But it is a cost consideration that we would need to take into consideration relatively short term. So one option, the cheaper option, is our tenant improvements at the railroad site. A longer term solution would be construction of a new facility or an alternate service delivery model.
Yeah, and that alternative service delivery model could dictate what kind of facility we have, or where it is. So I guess I'm not understanding what they're what are they doing when they're discussing potential alignment and synergies? What is it that you're asking them to do? Tell us if it should be in the city hall or in a separate building, or?
I think there's an importance of raising an estimate of the cost, and I think with the math that we've done on the Nolan Tam work, that we can make an educated guess about $1,000 a square foot for a police facility, maybe slightly more. I can clarify that with Janet Tam per square foot, but the number that we've been using is 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. So that's a number that we, from a financing challenge standpoint, we know. And we've made some educated guesses on the tenant improvements that would be needed at the Public Works building if we were moving them to Railroad for an indefinite period of time. And so those are cost considerations that are part of this whole package.
And to me, it's kind of like the architectural part. It's not a main focus, but I think it needs to kind of be part of the conversation. And if we have the bookends on the conversation, it shouldn't get too deeply into the weeds, but at least it's part of the consideration.
I see it as a piece of information that in a couple of years we may have to spend X million dollars on police. And the council may choose to do it by adding it to the city hall, or we may choose something else. But otherwise, I think we're taking him off the focus on the three main things and getting into a police discussion.
But Mary,
when we haven't even discussed it.
But what if it is this like a second story? Don't we need to know? I wouldn't want to know that cost as a part of the overall cost when we're making our choice. That's why it's in there.
But isn't that something we can just ask?
I just feel it needs to be part of the discussion. Otherwise, it's one of those things like that gets forgotten or left off. It doesn't need to be the main focus of it, but I think it needs to be in the conversation.
4,000 square foot, $1,000 a square foot.
Right.
Multiply.
$4 million.
Yeah. No. A little more than that.
Markups. All the markups.
Well, is there a way to notate that this doesn't want to be a main focus, but
I think that'll be part of my job in working with this group, is to communicate that it's not the central focus of the council. The council's really interested in this narrative approach focused on the primary 3 bullet points. And
be useful to know, though.
So how do you feel now that we're getting close? How is the
really, it's a question for you. Do you feel comfortable with this language? Because this is the roadmap. It does allow for adjustment. This reso does speak to the idea that if we need to adjust later, we can adjust later. The timeline is we've given you an example of what takes us every other week through April. That's on the back of the staff report. It allows for 6 meetings. We would have those meetings at this building. I am anticipating that this task force is going to need to have subcommittees that work on various elements of this between meetings. So I'm anticipating that each of the members will, a subcommittee of the task force will tackle different issues through this course to accelerate the process so we don't see it move beyond April.
Are we comfortable on this side? Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah.
Ms. Gerstein? Mr. Dorian? Okay.
Move approval of the resolution with all the amendments.
Second?
Second. I assume we're still talking about the criteria and stuff. That's step 2 and 3.
Yeah. But we have to get this one done, otherwise we're running out of time here.
And we can bring that back to you on the 14th if you'd like, or at the special meeting in
I think
January.
at the special meeting might.
Those just need directions.
And
Yeah.
could we
that's fine.
talk briefly about the special meeting, like
Yeah.
5 more minutes?
Can we get
Let's-
can we pass this resolution?
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. So we're going to run out of time again here. We got about a minute. What do you think?
It's 9:10 on my clock.
Oh, okay, great. We got 5 minutes.
Okay. I do think we should talk about this special meeting and what the scope of the meeting is, because we had an invitation tonight to open up the scope beyond what I anticipated we were going to do. I think when we may have reactions to how much open space there is on the Nolan-Tam massing diagrams, or what they put there as public space, but I don't think now is the time to tell them to plan an amphitheater or take care of the request of the Historical Society. I think we have to focus on what we have before us. And I don't really want to open the door now. I think it will really slow things down.
Isn't our contract? Sorry, Ms. Koberstein. Isn't our contract with Nolan Tam concluded? I mean, we've paid them, right? They delivered a report.
Not entirely, and we have approximately $100,000 left in their contract.
Oh, because in my mind, they've done fantastic work. Thank you very much. I don't know if they need to be the vehicle that we use to move forward, and I don't know if isn't whether Mr. McKelly's proposal, I mean, it should be aired. He should have a chance to get it on an agenda at some point. Absolutely. And why not? This is a perfect time to do it. If we're in further, is the point of this special meeting, which if it is in the early January, I can't attend, is the point to further ask questions of Nolan Tam, which I think is entirely appropriate. That'd be great. I'd like to know more. I'd like to ask more. I'd like the community to ask more. But if it's about arranging follow-on work for Nolan Tam to look at different configurations, this, that, and the other thing, I'm personally, as one person here, I'm not so psyched.
To me, it's about the Adams Street property, that meeting, and it would seem appropriate to, if we're talking about Nolan Tam's proposals in that area, to look at the other ideas from folks, because it's about the Adams Street.
I don't think it is about the Adams Street property. I think if we're going to talk about the Adams Street property, let's talk about the hotel proposal. I mean, I think we need to limit what we are doing, and we have yet as a council to speak publicly about what we think about all of that work they did and what they presented to us. And are we anywhere near making some kind of site selection or inching towards it? And I think we need to have that discussion to help this task force figure out what's in the council's mind here. Are they going to start all over and plan something else? If somebody wants to build an amphitheater for free in the future, fine, but I don't think that's the focus of this current effort.
So let's put it on the agenda for one of the regular council meetings. I mean, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Well, that's right. I think it's unrelated to the mission that we have right now that's focused. And I think, mission creep happens in government. We need to keep focusing, resist that. I think you're right that we should air it out. Any citizen that has ideas should be able to send that to us, first of all, offline. And then if they, give them a couple minutes, that's just respectful for our community, but it's not related to this workshop or the Nolan Tam, questions. I just don't see the two. And I think Mary makes a good point. Then we start opening it up to, what if you had 50 people decide they want to come to city council? Here's my plan. Here's my plan. It's like,
yeah,
I don't think that makes sense.
So if we look at it that way, that the special meeting is focused on the Nolan Tam, and then we agendize the other idea at a regular meeting.
Well, can I ask if we are going to agendize the rest of Adams Street? I mean, we had another request tonight to do that. I mean, where are we opening the door and where are we closing the door?
That's a really good question. I mean, we were going to plan on agendizing the Adams Street plan from 2009. We never agendized it, and I think that was brought up today. Just because we agendize it doesn't mean it's next month.
Mayor Ellsworth, may I remind you it's 9:15?
Okay.
If you
Do
like to
we
extend
want to
it.
continue this discussion? Is there a motion to continue? So, not seeing one, we will adjourn.
I can tell you that I don't have great clarity on the on the focus for January 8th or 9th. But my impression is that the direction is that we would bring Nolan Tam, and you would have a conversation about the Nolan Tam presentation from November 12th and have an ability to talk amongst yourselves about what you saw, what you're thinking, and ask questions of them.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that sounds like the direction for that, and we'll deal
And
with the other issue.
my other curiosity is whether you consider item 14 as a receive and file, or whether that should come back on a subsequent agenda for a conversation. Is that the last item? 10.4.
Any thoughts?
Just receive and file.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will adjourn the meeting.